All right, so we've got a bunch of different product ideas. We've put them through our funnel. We've gone through the scorecard, and we feel like we might have a potential product that we may actually want to develop and launch into the world. But we obviously have to create that product. We've got to find a factory. We've got to make sure that the quality's executed properly. We've got to make sure that the features and the vision that we have for those products can be realized and the cost makes sense. So how do you do that? This entire module, we're going to go through a funnel around sourcing, really accumulating a bunch of different factory options and how to find the best potential suppliers, how to use a supplier scorecard and actually figure out based on different criteria which one may be a fit, and ultimately how to negotiate the delivery and price of the product that you want to create. And you want to think about this honestly like dating. You're not going to talk to one person, go on one date, and then marry that person. You're going to want to have a bunch of different options. You're going to want to make sure that your values and all the criteria that you care about in a partner are met. And the same thing for a factory, because they literally are a partner. This is likely going to be somebody, if you've got a successful product, that you work with for 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years. And it legitimately is an extension of your business. And so it's a critical decision, but there's a process here that we're going to really help make that decision as close to accurate as possible so that you select the right factory and you select the right partner.
So before you start messaging suppliers, you first need to know exactly what you want. This is one of the part of the process where a lot of people don't put enough time into, and this is super critical because if you don't even know what you want, how can you expect someone else to actually make the product for you? They're gonna have a bunch of questions for you, and you're gonna go back and forth until they know what exactly you want, and then it's just a basically like time waste. And also, I would also say the other part of this is that if you know what you want, it seems like to them that you are a professional to deal with. They will actually enjoy dealing with you a lot better versus, can you imagine if you're a supplier, right? If you're a factory and every single day you get hundreds of emails, right? And then 90% of them are just like, hey, I'm looking for this. Can you help me? Versus you coming on and be like, hey, I'm looking for this in this color, in this weight, in this dimension, in this, in this, in this. Like I know exactly what they want. There's a lot more clarity. Therefore, they're actually going to prioritize their working relationship with you more than the other 90 people. So here are some of the things that you need to know in order to get an accurate quote. The first thing is color, right? If you're selling a mug, what color is it? Very simple, very straightforward, right? The other thing is the size. So with this, I would recommend for you to literally tell them like in inches or centimeters what exactly it is with like a dimension. Number 3 is packaging types. Are you looking for plastic bags? Are you looking for a container? Are you looking for box? What are you looking for? Then it's the insert card, which we'll talk a little bit about later. You want an insert card in your packaging, as well as the material of the product. What is the actual material that you want this product to be used? There's many different materials. Some are expensive, some are cheap, but you should know the material that you want this. And a lot of people are like, well, how do I know that? You can simply look at your competitors. You can do some Google research. You can ask ChatGPT in order for you to get that answer. You also want to ask them the lead times, like how long would it take them to actually manufacture this product? You can also ask them about pricing. Obviously, that's super important as well. A picture is worth more than 1,000 words. So I would really recommend if you want to go ahead and actually create your product, take a lot of pictures of your competitor. So I'll give you a quick example. A friend of mine was launching this backpack company and they ended up doing millions of dollars per year in sales. And with this backpack, all he wanted was to actually add in additional features. So in order to actually get his point across, all he did was take an existing backpack, he took a picture of it from multiple angles, and then he literally drew on the picture what he wanted added here, what he wanted added here. So he's putting whatever is up here as a visionary and he's putting down a piece of paper so he can explain exactly what he wants. And this is such a, part of the process that so many people don't do, but make sure you do this. So let's say if you were to launch a coffee cup, but you want a different design on it. Well, get a graphic designer to put that design on. If you want to launch a coffee cup with a different type of handle on it, just roughly sketch what the handle will look like. Take another picture, something similar, and tell the manufacturer what you're looking for. So the more detail, the more description you can give the manufacturer, the easier it is for the manufacturer to give you the right quote, to give you the right lead time, and all these different things.
Okay, so you've got a list of all the things that describe what the product is that you want to build. You've got a core foundation. Now you want to actually reach out and develop a supplier list and speak again to as many potential factory partners as possible so that you can hone in on all the factors that matter and select the right factory. So what are the things that you want to care about when you're developing a qualified supplier list? So with this part of the process, you want to find the right factory that can create a quality product first. Pricing, terms, all those other things will come later. And one of the biggest mistakes that we see sellers making is they focus only on price. And by focusing only on price, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the best factory, that you're going to get their best product. And ultimately, there could be a lot of problems down the line if you focus only on price. Second big issue that we see is there's something called trading companies versus factories. Now, factories are the actual facility with all the equipment that bring all the raw materials together to make and create your product. Trading companies are basically middlemen. They work with other factories, they take their product catalogs, they go onto Alibaba and they sell them to sellers, but they're literally in an office building. They're not actually making the product, and you tend to pay a lot more in terms of markup on that product. So we want to find factories versus actual trading companies. One of the easiest ways that you can do this, and we're going to show this in the over-the-shoulder example, is if they've got an office address. So it's like in an office building on floor 18, that's likely going to be a trading company. So we definitely want to avoid those where possible. Another element is the number of years they've been in business. There's times to take risk in business, but when we're talking about actual factories, I don't want somebody that's just been doing this for a year or less. I want somebody that's been in business for 3, 5, 10 years, because they're not going to go anywhere. The worst thing that you would have happen is that you start a product, you actually have success with it, you're launched, it's going well, and then the factory goes under and you've got to go do that process again, and that could cause a major delay in your business. So we want long-term stable partners, and the number of years in business is a key criteria when you're developing your supplier list. The next is certifications. You don't need to overthink this, but one thing that you'll find when you start to accumulate your list is you'll start to see some certifications that a lot of the more higher quality factories have. These are usually ISO certifications and other manufacturing certifications. Those are a good sign because it shows that they're more professional. They have to pay a lot of money to get those certifications. Oftentimes they're in business a long time to get those certifications. So looking at those certifications that they do have at both the factory level as well as the products they make is often an indicator of a quality supplier. Now, when you start to actually engage with your suppliers, probably the early thing that we look out for the most is communication. You know, if you send over your worksheet with all the things that you want answers to and a description of your product, and they only answer one of the questions, China's on a different time zone, so it's not like you can communicate real time. Oftentimes you'll have to wait till the next day. So if you're having to re-communicate 3, 4, 5 times, that could be 2 weeks of communication. So you want somebody that's going to respond efficiently and quickly, but most importantly, that's actually going to address the things that you bring up in your communication, and that they're not wasting time, because that could be really, really costly in product development. Some other red flags, and a major one, is excuses. If you get into the mix and you think you're going to get something by a certain time, or the sample's late, or the sample arrives and it's not at all what you communicated and what you guys agreed upon, if that happens early, it's just like a relationship. If you got red flags on the first, second date, that's probably not somebody you want to marry, because it's likely going to be a lot worse when you actually get involved in a more deeper factory relationship. So anytime you see excuses, anytime, just trust your gut. If there's things that just don't feel right as you develop your supplier list and your initial communications, listen to that gut feeling, pay attention to those red flags.
Hey guys, in this video, we're going to go over how Alibaba works. Alibaba is going to be a website where you're going to use quite frequently, especially during the process of finding your product. It is simply a marketplace where it connects manufacturers overseas with us. So we can find manufacturers using this website. So Alibaba, just go to alibaba.com and you probably want to sign up for an account. Very, very simple. But once you get to the homepage, you will see something like this. Now, obviously this changes once in a while. Yours might look a little bit different, but over here, there's different categories, just like on Amazon. And over here, right in the middle, there is a search bar. Now, something that's really interesting right off the bat is we can find products and we can find manufacturers. Is there one that you use more frequently than the other, or you kind of like to toggle between the two?
I like to use products. I think one thing that is valuable about the manufacturer section is it's usually they'll manufacture a category of products. So you might find somebody that does sporting goods or eyewear. And
silicone stuff.
Yeah, that's like a good example. But the products is usually where I'll start. But using both can be beneficial, and definitely recommend doing both because you might uncover different supplier options using either toggle. But starting with products is probably the best bet.
Yeah, so let's say that we want to source Dermaroller. So we'd simply click on search, type that in. And then over here, you'll just get listings of Dermarollers, right? So you can toggle between this view, or you can toggle between this view. Either or, I like this view a little bit better because you can see a little bit more. But over here, as you can see, there are tons and tons of suppliers. So how do you narrow this down? Well, the first thing I like to do is I like to put trade assurance. Yeah. That's something I personally like to do. You can also put something called verified suppliers as well. Again, nothing that's like you don't have to use it, but definitely an option for you to do it if you want. And again, if you don't know what each one of these is, you can simply click on this and it will actually explain what a trade assurance is, what a verified supplier is. Down here, you can actually select which region you want this to. So do you want them from China? Do you want this from Hong Kong? Do you want this from Taiwan? So a bunch of these things. This is super helpful in a sense that if you do know that there are certain types of certifications that you want, you can definitely click on here. Each of these, we're not going to go in each of these certifications, but there are some products that definitely need certifications, some that don't. And then over here are product certifications. For example, I know that, if you need a battery product, then you should select one of these guys. So there's definitely a lot more filters that you can go through over here, but the ones I recommend are trade assurance and verified supplier. So now we filter down to some manufacturers. And from here, what I like to do is I like to just open up a few tabs, take a look at who these people are. So let's say if you were to open up one of these tabs, now you get to go on a page that looks like this. Now, the very first thing I would say is that this pricing, you can see that if you buy 100 boxes, it's $1.42. If you buy 500 boxes, it's $1.12. Like, don't even look at this, right? Because this doesn't mean much. This is more like a placeholder in my opinion. I believe that you can get probably a pretty good discount by negotiating with them, which I'll talk a little bit about in the negotiation chapter, but anywhere between 20, 30, even up to 40%. So here are some photos of the products that they sell. Here's the title. Here's the pricing. Again, don't worry so much about this. And what I like to do is I like to actually go down to the bottom here where it says product details. So here is where you can learn a little bit more about the actual product itself. So here are some, again, more product photos. And if we were to go up, go to company profile, this is where you can actually learn a little bit more about the company themselves. So earlier, Adam had talked about there's difference of trading companies versus manufacturer. And based on what I see here, this is clearly a trading company. There's no manufacturer, there's no machinery. Usually, you want to see machines. You want to see like those machines that will actually produce the product. Here is simply a trading company. So in this case, I will actually not really go with them. And you can see that they also sell other products like makeup removal pads, derma roller, exfoliating gloves, reusable menstrual pads, and bath brush, which is quite interesting. So here are just some examples of like, again, the certifications that they have, right? The CE and whatever. They will put all their certifications here. So you can also go on the right side hand here and you click on the profile. So this is the name of their company, right? These are all the certifications that they have. These are all the other Alibaba listings that they have. And yeah, you can go down here, look at the company history. You can look at the company introduction. Alibaba did an on-site check, meaning someone actually went to the office, so they're legitimate. So we looked at an example of a trading company because their pictures only show offices. Now let's see if we can find an example of an actual factory. So we found this company right here. And again, these are some of the same things as we saw last time. You can scroll down to here if you want. Here are some really cool materials. So earlier we talked about product offering. So this is a really cool way for you to actually learn more about the material, for you to learn more about the actual specification of the product itself. So you can see how many needles there are, the colors that they offer, the material, what different sizes is. So when you're actually sending your sheet over to a manufacturer, this will be a very good outline for you to have as well. So what we want to do is we want to click on the manufacturer name, and then we want to go to the profile, go to the company profile. And over here now, we can check out some of the other photos that they have, click on production, and you can see that this is a factory. They're actually putting stuff together on this assembly line. So you can be sure that this particular company that we found is the actual factory itself. So now, how do you actually contact them? Well, it's very simple. You can click on chat now or click on contact supplier. And what's cool is that they put all their information here. So they use WhatsApp, they use WeChat, they have their phone number, they have their Skype ID, they have their email. So you can actually either use Alibaba's internal messaging platform, or you can actually contact them through Skype or WhatsApp or email. Adam, is there a way that you prefer, or do you like to add them on WhatsApp and WeChat, or do you like to just use the Alibaba?
Yeah, I think the best way to do it initially is just to use the contact supplier button where you actually send the equivalent of an email, but it's within Alibaba's platform. It's a central location where, especially if you're reaching out to 5, 10, 15, 20 different potential suppliers, you're going to get all those messages back within the Alibaba platform. Typically what happens once you've actually found a handful that you actually think might be worth evaluating deeper and getting samples, they'll typically move over to WeChat, which is a communication app that's used primarily in China that we'll get into in another video on how to use. But start off using the contact supplier and then come in the next day and you'll have a handful of responses that will come pretty quickly. Again, it enables you to kind of keep track of who's responding quickly, who's not. And frankly, you can copy and paste the same message to these folks. So it's really efficient. You can copy, paste, and reach out to a lot of potential factories in a short amount of time using the Alibaba chat feature. So going over the shoulder with Tom, we just saw Alibaba.com, and while you can find countries outside of China on Alibaba.com, primarily you're going to tend to find those specifically from China. We've actually compiled a list of resources in the PDF that we've linked down below for non-China sources and non-China strategies that you can leverage. But what I'll say is this: I've had a ton of students over the years, a ton of people ask me questions. There's a lot of political concern and stigma about operating in China. Hey, what happens if Taiwan gets invaded? Or is the government going to shut down Chinese manufacturing? There are definitely some risks and concerns, but what I would say is 95+% of the time, it's going to be the right choice to actually find a factory in China. And there's a bunch of reasons for this. First of all, they've been at this for 20, 30 years, and they are legitimately the best at the world at manufacturing efficiently really high quality products. Also, most of the trade lanes in terms of shipping lines and actually moving your product and transporting it, there's just a ton of infrastructure doing it from China. So you might say, hey, I'm going to go to Pakistan or Vietnam or Thailand or some other country outside of China because you want to avoid that risk. But what tends to happen is they don't have the same infrastructure for shipping and logistics. They're not as experienced, and so there's massive, massive quality issues. The costs tend to be higher. So I would just say that if you're a diamond student, you can talk to your advisor about this, but generally speaking, as a rule of thumb, China is going to be your best option, despite the fact that you may see some stuff in the media that may be risky.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say this, like we manufacture in the US, we manufactured in China, we manufacture in other places. I've taught thousands of students. China, like I know that there's concerns with regards to like the war or whatever, but like if the war actually does happen, this should be the least of your concerns. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
China, like look around this room, man. Like everything is made in China. Like Apple makes their computers in China. You think you want to go to another country and make your products somewhere else? No, like they know what they're doing when it comes to, Chinese manufacturing. So I get your concerns. I understand all of them, but 99.99% of the time, your product is better suitable to be made in China. Now, I will say this. If, for example, I had a skincare company, a lot of people didn't want to, I know that women don't like to put certain types of products on their face and in their body, like, supplements and skincare stuff. Don't make those in China, right? Make those in like South Korea, make those in USA, which is where we had a lot of manufacturing made from. But if you're selling like, iPhone cases or I don't know, cups or whatever it might be, like even Adam's, like your bike, I'm sure is made in China. Just go with Alibaba, go with the Chinese supplier. It's going to save you tons and tons of headache. I can promise you that.
This video will talk about how you can apply for Alibaba sales tax exemption, also known as A-step. When you buy something, you're most likely required to pay sales tax. But if you're buying something for resale, then the sales tax is paid by the end user. You do not have to pay sales tax if you are a wholesaler or retailer. To avoid paying taxes to Alibaba, you need to prove that you are a reseller. You need to apply for and enroll in Alibaba's sales tax exemption program, also known as A-step. All right, let's start. Sign into Alibaba.com, sign into your account, and go to My Alibaba. Then on the left-hand side, go to Orders, and go to Tax Information. Add or modify tax exemption. Read the information, check the box, and click Start My Application. Select the state that you're in. I am in California. Select the tax exemption type. For most of us, it will be resale. Click Continue. This part is about your company. Enter your organization name, organization industry, I would say e-commerce, business address, city, state, the zip code, authorized signer name, so that'd be your name, authorized signer title, so you can say president, CEO, I'm just going to say owner. Click Continue. All right, it's going to ask you for more information, but this part of the form, it depends on what state that you chose. The information asked here is for the people in the state of California. Your form might look a little different. I'm engaged as a registered, and then I would say retailer. Describe generally the property you will be purchasing with your sales and use tax exemption. So basically, what are you buying from Alibaba? So I would say ceramic cups. Do you have a California state resale number? So I say yes, and then I add the number. Click Continue. If you don't have this number, look at the very end of this video and I'll show you how to apply for one. Here you sign your name. You can also click Clear if you want to try again. Click Continue. And that's it. So what I do next is click the download button. The downloaded form will look something like this. Read it through, make sure all the information is correct. Go back to the Alibaba website. On the bottom, click Submit. And that's it. You have submitted your Alibaba sales tax exemption form. Now you just wait to see if your form has been approved or not. If you want to check the progress of your application form, go back to the tax information page. So go to My Alibaba, go to your orders, go to tax information. On this page, click Add or Modify Tax Exemption. Scroll to the bottom and you'll see the progress of your application form. Right now it says it's under review. When it's ready, it'll say that it's verified. And that's how you apply for sales tax exemption in Alibaba. When you are applying for Alibaba's sales tax exempt program, you're going to need some documentation to prove that you're allowed to resell items. You are actually a retailer. So you can apply for one of these either through your city or your local district, or you can also apply through the state that you're in. They can be called a reseller's permit, a reseller's license, a seller's permit, or a vendor's permit, or something like that. If you don't have one, Alibaba has videos on how you can apply for it. So let's go look at that. Go to alibaba.com, scroll all the way to the bottom, click Sales Tax and VAT. On this page, you need to scroll down until you get to all the videos. Here, Alibaba gives you videos on how you can apply for a reseller's permit if you're in Florida, in California, Georgia, New York, Texas, and more. So if you don't have this permit, apply for one, and that will allow you to apply for sales tax exemption on Alibaba.
All right, how do you actually pay Chinese supplier, right? Do you send them Bitcoin? Do you get on an airplane and get a suitcase? How do you actually pay them? Well, there's a few different methods. Some are cheaper than others. Some are a little bit more risky than others, but we're gonna outline everything for you. So the first way to pay them is actually through Alibaba. Alibaba has their own internal payment processing called Alibaba Trade Assurance. Basically, Alibaba want to assure that, the quality of the product is good. And if there's anything wrong, you as a buyer have 30 days to file for this trade assurance. It's basically insurance, right? And then you can potentially get covered. However, having said that, you only have 30 days. So make sure if you do go through this service, you get it done within the first 30 days. The second way is through PayPal. We really don't recommend this method, although PayPal will kind of protect you if everything goes wrong, but PayPal fees are extremely high, so your margins will get reduced. So I don't recommend PayPal. So another way for you to pay for your goods is using credit card. Now, for smaller orders like your samples, you can pay that through PayPal. You can pay that through credit card. That's not a problem. But anything I would say under $2,500, you can use in a credit card. But for anything over that, credit card fees really add up, and the currency exchange fees and all that type of stuff. So I really like to stay away from credit cards, but it is a good way to actually build some points as well if you have a really crazy points card. But again, generally speaking, for the larger orders, I've never ever used credit cards. Another way, and I would say this is the most common way, is by sending a bank wire. And you get a wire information from your Chinese supplier's bank. You can go online or you can go to your physical branch here in Canada, US, or where you're from, and say, I would like to send a wire directly from my account over to theirs. And always make sure that the currency is the exact same, or else the bank actually takes a currency fee. So what I mean by that is you're most likely going to be actually paying in US dollars. So when you do send money to Chinese suppliers, make sure it's in US dollars. Banks don't really have the best exchange rate. Again, this is more for Canadian students. So what I would do is I'll take the money, go to like exchange currency place, and then get the best rate. Always negotiate the rates. Then get the USD, deposit into your US dollar account, and then the wire will get sent from your US dollar account to their US dollar account.
All right, so samples. This is frankly one of the most exciting parts of the process. It's kind of like Christmas waiting for all the potential products that you're getting from the suppliers that you've vetted coming in. And it's super fun, but we want to talk a little bit about what that process looks like. So again, we reach out to a ton of different suppliers. We've used the scorecard for suppliers to hone in on the ones that we actually think might have some viability. But you ultimately need to test and physically feel what the quality of the product is. What's the touch and feel? How does it work? Is the quality there? And that's the sampling process. But a couple things to keep in mind. First of all, let's say your product costs $4 when you order a production order. You're going to have to pay a significant amount more for samples. And the main reason for that is typically shipping. Because you're not shipping it via ocean, you're typically going to have air freight. It's going to be more expensive up front. So a product that costs $5 might cost you $50, $60 to get as a sample. That is absolutely normal. So don't let that scare you. You've got to factor that into the equation. The other thing I would say is that any of the sample costs that you incur once you actually decide to use a particular factory, they'll often deduct that from your first production order. So keep that in mind. There is a process to actually consolidate samples so that instead of sending 4 or 5 different factory samples at 50, 60 bucks a pop, you can actually have them centrally shipped to a place in China where they put them all in one box and only send you one package. So that's one way to cut down on those costs. We're going to put some links down below that will be resources for you if you actually want to consolidate your sample shipment. Another benefit of getting all the samples at one time is you get to kind of line them all up, right? You get to experience them all in person at the same time, which gives you a better perspective when you're comparing and contrasting which options may make sense to actually negotiate from a production standpoint. The other thing that you want to do with samples is I always like to say, I want you to send these to me in the actual production packaging or close to production packaging as possible. The reason is you don't want it to come in some plastic bag and then you're going to have to order a second sample in production to make sure that the packaging looks right. That's not to say that you can't make tweaks in production, but you want it to be as close as possible in size, quality, dimensions, how they actually pack it for safety, etc. So you can see those. Also, if you want to see multiple options on packaging, you can ask them to send multiple options as well. So maybe you want to try different quality of cardboard. Maybe you want to see one color versus another one. Use the sampling process and that expensive shipping to make sure you're getting as many options as possible so you don't need to send a secondary shipment.
Make sure you buy your competitors' products on Amazon as well. This is going to be really handy when you compare all the options. So you got your samples over here, you got your top competitors over here. Which one of those are actually going to be the best one? And this is where the focus group comes in handy again. Earlier, we had mentioned that you should conduct focus groups to generate ideas. Well, go back to the same focus group, go back to the same people and ask them, hey, now I got my sample. Which one do you think is best? And then also ask them, like, these are my competitors. Do you think ours is better than theirs or theirs is better than ours? If everybody is like, honestly, your competitor is so much better than yours, you know you have room to improve. And that's good for them to tell you upfront rather than for you to order hundreds and thousands of units. Then you're stuck with it and other people are like, well, your competitors are better than yours. Why should I buy yours over your competitors? So that's super, super important. It's very normal for this process to take a few rounds. Don't expect the supplier to send you the perfect example, the perfect sample, and then you're like, oh my God, this is perfect. Or like, oh my God, this is so far apart. You know, this is going to require communication. This is going to require some back and forth. You should tell them, I like this, I don't like this, please change this. Please keep this. That way they can send you another round of sample to see if you're actually closer to the end goal. So make sure you're patient with this. This is all about setting the solid foundation and making sure that we have the perfect product when we launch.
Yeah, and just a final point I'll put here on samples, and I think it's really, really important. It's related to decision fatigue. So I, in my first product that I ever launched with my home goods brand, very similar to you guys, right? I looked at a ton of different product ideas. I finally honed in on one that I thought made sense, which was an umbrella stand, like a modern umbrella stand. did exactly what you're doing, reached out to tons of different factories, whittled that down to 3 or 4, got those samples. And it sometimes could be months in the process, and you're emotionally invested. You're thinking about the future. Like, there's a lot of emotional commitment involved here. And I received the sample, and it looked a little bit different than the photos. It was basically small, right? Like, it looked really good in the photos, but I'm like, oh, this thing's a little bit small. But because I was so committed, I was months in, I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to do this product, and let's see what happens. Well, guess what happened? All the reviews.
It didn't happen.
All the reviews said that the thing was too small, and like, I should have listened to my gut, but I didn't because I was pot committed, what they call in poker. I'd invested too much, and I felt like I just had to go through with it anyway. So if you get to a point in the sampling process where something's not right, you don't feel right about it, or you talk to people in a focus group setting and they tell you something, listen to your gut on this. It's worth that additional extra effort either to tweak the product and make the improvements necessary for it to work, or to just say, look, I'm not going to put good money after bad. I might need to just cancel this idea and go to some other ideas. So listen to your gut, be really thoughtful about this part in the process, take your emotions and your fatigue out of it, and make the right decision.
So sometimes a lot of students have asked me like, hey, my product is going to be a little bit complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. I don't want to invest in the injection mold yet. How can I get a sample that way? Well, in China, you can actually do this by 2 methods, the CNC as well as the 3D printing method. So, 3D printers are everywhere now. So what you can simply ask them is for a 3D printing of your particular set of criteria or your product, and they can send that to you. And you can see if the 3D printing is actually close to what you imagine in your head.
So how do you actually get custom samples and those features that truly differentiate and make your product unique? Again, going back to the product development process, we want to stand out. We don't want to be the same as everybody else. In fact, if we're a Me Too product, that's the surest way to actually get your butt kicked on Amazon and lose money. So we want to make those tweaks and those differences, but how do you go about doing that? There's easy ways to do customization, and there's more difficult and more costly and more time-consuming ways. Some of the easier ways are changing the color, doing a new design, adding a new graphic. That's pretty self-explanatory and easy to get done, and most of those don't require a whole lot of heavy lifting or cost. If you change the material, again, not tremendously complicated, but it's a next level up. And then you can start to get into much more complicated customizations that require custom molds. And basically what molds are is, at the Chinese manufacturer, they'll take typically a metal block and they'll shave it out for whatever custom shape you want to have made. And those can cost anywhere from $500 to $100,000. And I've actually spent money across those spectrums. So the smaller the part that you need to customize, it's typically going to be a lot less expensive. $1,000 or $2,000. If you're talking about a really big part because it's a bigger piece of metal, that's going to be into the $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 range. So customization is really important, but understand how difficult or easy that customization is.
Yeah, and then we have a great interview with a girl named Emily. She's a mold designer, so we're going to link that in the next video. Please watch that if you're interested in customizing your product to the point where you need a custom mold. She is great for that. It's a great interview. So watch that video if you're interested in learning more.
Hello, everybody. How is everyone doing? It is a beautiful Thursday morning. Can you guys all hear me okay? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Yes, yes, amazing, fantastic. Turn your cameras on so I can see your beautiful faces. I know it's morning time, so you guys shouldn't be in your pajamas like our normal 6 p.m. calls. I'm very excited. Today we have Emily. Let me just see if I can find her here, and I'm going to make her a co-host. 1 minute. More, make co-host. Perfect. Awesome. And then we are also going to pin you, Emily. Perfect. Awesome, guys. I am so excited for today's call. Today we have Emily Cooper with us, and she is in the UK, which is why we're having a morning call. And today she's going to be talking all about custom products, and I will also let her give you guys a little bit of an introduction here. Emily, can you hear us, and does your microphone work? Let's see.
Yeah, it should do. Hi, Samantha. Okay.
Perfect. Awesome. So from my understanding, you have some things prepared for us to kind of go over. Maybe you can give us a little bit of an introduction. How did you get to be in this position of designing custom products?
Yeah, so I started at university. I did product design as a BA, and then from there I went on to I did a placement year in my third year, and from there I then qualified with a first class degree and went to work in a product design company designing products for outdoor and litter bins, and that's where I got my knowledge really of manufacturing.
Amazing. Awesome. Cool. And let me just see here. Did you have like a presentation for us today, or are you just planning to kind of chat with us about like the process? Let me know.
Yeah, I've got a presentation for you.
Okay,
so
perfect.
let's
Let
do
me give
that.
you screen sharing permission here.
Thank you.
All right, let's see if you can do that. Hopefully you're able to share screen now. Let me know if it's working.
Yeah, that's fine. Should be able to. Yeah, it's not letting me screen share. for some reason.
Okay, here, let me try one more thing. Try that now.
Okay.
There we go.
Screen share.
Perfect. Yes, we can see your screen.
Yeah, you can see it?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
good.
you can take it away.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Move it all the way. Okay. So firstly, we're going to be talking about injection molding, which is a manufacturing process for plastics. So injection molding is a manufacturing process used to produce complex plastic products in large quantities. It is also, it's also a mass production process used to manufacture thousands of identical parts. The higher the quantity of the parts produced, the less expensive the parts will be. So for example, if you were to injection mold 1,000 toothbrushes, the unit cost would be $30. However, if you injection molded 50,000 toothbrushes, the unit cost would be $2. So therefore, injection molding is for manufacturing large quantities, as increased volume reduces the unit cost. The advantages to injection molding is the unit cost is considerably cheaper than other manufacturing processes. However, the upfront tooling cost for manufacturing is very expensive, and the average price, depending on the product size and complexity, ranges from $5,000 to $100,000 plus. This price is for the tooling cost only and doesn't include the unit cost. This is definitely something you need to consider if you decide to injection mold a product for yourselves. Injection molding plastics uses plastic pellets, which are injected into the mold cavity using pressure and heat to melt the pellets and fill the molds with molten plastic, which are then cooled to solidify and produce plastic products. You can use injection molding for producing other materials as well, such as liquid silicon, metals, glass. However, the most common process is for thermoplastics and thermosetting polymers. The image below, which you can see, is an injection molding machine. The size of an average machine is about 40 by 8 feet. So it's quite a large machine. So how does injection molding work? So resin pellets all.
Let me just interject here. Can we go back to the previous slide just for a quick second?
Yeah, of course.
I'll kind of interject here because a lot of our students are like brand new, like they might have like just joined our Amazon course and they're like, holy crap, like what is going on? Like this is pretty complicated. So I'm just gonna try and like dump things down a little bit for some people, just so I make sure that even if you're brand new to the course, that you're still following along on what Emily is talking about and saying. So when we're talking about injection molding, guys, this is, you want to think of it on two different costs, just like Emily said. So we have the price for the actual mold. So that's like the mold cavity to inject, say, the plastic or silicone or metal, whatever it is. You have the cost for that mold, but you're also going to have the cost for like per unit, right? So if you're ordering 1,000 units, you know, that's going to be more expensive than say if you're ordering 100,000 units, right? Does anyone have any questions right now? Feel free to put in the chat if you do have any questions. We'll kind of do periodic pauses here so that if you do have questions along the way, that nobody's getting lost, because I know this can be a little bit of a complex topic to discuss. But does everyone understand that so far? You know, you have your injection mold cost, and then you also have the cost per unit, okay? So this is why it can be a little bit more expensive than, you know, purchasing something that's already pre-made by suppliers, right? Cool. Doesn't look like anyone has any questions so far. So let's continue. Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, sorry if I'm going a bit quick.
Yeah, no worries. You're like, this is like the back of my hand. You're like, I know this stuff, easy peasy.
Right, okay. So how injection molding works. So resin pellets are then loaded into the injection molding machine, which is then programmed to calculate the amount of plastic required to fill the molds. The resin pellets then move from the hopper and are funneled into the barrel where heaters are used to melt the pellets, creating molten plastic. The ram and the rotating screw work together to compress and inject the resin into the mold cavity. Once the mold cavity has been filled with the resin, steel injector pins are used to facilitate the removal of the part from the mold where it falls into the loader bin. I understand this is very, quite complicated, but there are going to be some videos and animation as well to show you exactly what all this means.
Perfect. That's great.
So molds and tooling, they're required for injection molding. These molds can be produced using aluminium and steel. Both have advantages and disadvantages. The advantages to aluminium is that the tooling cost is more cost effective, which is ideal for low volume units, as the upfront cost investment is less expensive. Aluminium molds transfer heat more efficiently than steel, which allows more parts to be produced as the mold doesn't require cooling channels. However, aluminium isn't compatible with injection molding complex parts or high detail features because of the softness of the metal. The advantages to steel molds is that due to its durability and its strength, it is ideal for producing high volumes and high precision detail features. However, steel requires cooling channels, which make it more prone to defect and warping. So you get problems with sink marks, which cause problems with the actual part. Steel molds are more expensive and difficult to repair if the design does require modifications or it is damaged during production. Designers send the CAD part to the injection molders to manufacture a tool designer at the manufacturers. 3D models the tool design using the CAD part to create a positive and negative mold. These molds are then CNC machined to produce the tool ready for injection molding. Once the tool has been designed, it can be used for injection molding. This is just a quick diagram of how injection molding works. So I said all those words before, which I understand a lot of you won't understand, but hopefully this will help a little bit. So the ram, which is number 1, the ram is used to push the material forward. And number 2 is the screw. The screw is energy supplied by the rotation screw, works with the heaters to convert the pellets into a molten state. So they go from pellets into a liquefied plastic. The hopper is then used to feed the plastic pellets into the injection molding machine. So the hopper is like a filtering system that it works out and calculates how many plastic pellets you will need. Then once it's gone through the hopper, the barrel works with the rotating screw and the heaters to melt the plastic pellets. The heaters are used to heat the barrel to convert the pellets into molten, ready for being injected. Then this material is ready to push through the nozzle. So number 7 is the nozzle. The nozzle forces the plastic into the mold. Now the molds can be aluminium or they can be steel as well. So that will affect the cooling of the product. Molds, and then number 9 is the part is injected and the process is repeated. It's just
Here, while we conceptualize this. So number 3, that's going to be like all of our plastic little parts, like all of the little pellets, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then number 1, can you explain the ram one more time? Because how is the ram like pushing things through? How does that work?
Yeah, so the ram pushes the actual, so it's like a syringe. So at the end of the syringe, it pushes it through. So once you push it, then it will, all the liquid and all the material moves forward.
Oh, okay, cool, awesome. Does anyone have any questions on this image so far? Jeffrey has a question. Once you're finished making it, doesn't the material cool and jam up the barrel?
No, so what happens is there's injector pins, and the injector pins push out the plastic. So once the plastic's fallen, then a new part is created.
Right, right. So what happens is the hot plastic goes through the nozzle, which is number 7. It
Yes.
fills up the mold, which is number 8. And
Yes.
within that mold, there's these little pin-like things that kind of push out the finished product, which is number 9. And after the product is pushed out, the mold would reclose and allow for another round of plastic to be injected, correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Right. So in the process of when that part is being ejected, let's say, does the plastic stay hot, like within area number 6, like within, like, does it stay warm in there?
Yeah, so number 5 are pointing at heaters.
Oh, right.
So they heat the plastic underneath, and that's what melts it from the pellets to the resin that goes
Right.
through.
And then the mold itself, which is number 8, would that have, I guess, the ability to cool the plastic at that point? Is that how it works?
So number 8 is, so that's the mold. So molds can be aluminium or they can be steel. So aluminium is used for rapid production. So they cool down an awful lot quicker than steel molds. So steel molds use cooling channels, which apply a lot of cooling into them. And then that's how they cool. So steel ones can't cool without a cooling channel, whereas aluminium molds can. Does that make sense?
Okay, that makes sense. Dave has a good question. How long is the plastic in the mold cooling? What is the duration of a process cycle before the mold is used again?
So that depends again on if it's rapid. So if it's a rapid one, I've got a video in a bit which shows how bottle caps are made, but they're produced every 2 seconds. They produce bottle caps.
Holy smokes, every 2 seconds.
Yeah, so that's aluminium tooling. So that cools really quickly. Then it releases it with the injector pins, and then that goes into the loading bin. And then again, every 2 seconds. So it does depend on the process you use and what your product is, you know, if it's complex or if it's quite a simple product.
Great. Jeffrey has another great question. What about bubbles? How does this this image, this molding diagram that we see here, how does it keep bubbles from forming? Because I imagine in number 3 in the hopper, when the pellets are coming through, there is a bit of air between
Yes.
hard pellets. How does it keep from bubbles forming?
So there's a screw in there, which is a rotating screw. So that keeps the mixture constantly moving around. So as it's a liquid, it just keeps it pushing through with the ram, and the screw rotates to push everything through and get rid of the bubbles.
Awesome. And one more question here before we move on. What is the life cycle of the various mold materials that we see on the screen here? So once we pay to have this all made, does it last forever?
Injection molding is better than rotor molding. I'm not sure exactly how many cycles you can do it. It does depend on the product. You know, some can get faulty very quickly, but they should last. Injection molding, I mean, can be going on 24 hours a day, every day. So they should last a long time.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Awesome. No more questions so far.
Okay. No, that's absolutely fine. There's an animation now, so that should help with a bit more understanding of how it works.
Awesome. I'm excited.
I think.
Yeah, I know that I can't hear anything, but we can see it.
Okay, that's all right. That's okay. I'll talk you through it anyway, don't worry.
Yeah, perfect.
So that's the mold, and they're the injector pins that just pushed forward then. So that is the, so this funnel looking thing here is the hopper. So they're the pellets that are going into the hopper. They've been measured out, how many they need for each part.
Cool.
These are the heating elements. So they're used to melt the resin pellets into the molten plastic ready to be injected. Yeah, so this is the rotating screw that I mentioned before. So the screw feeds the molten plastic through the barrel when it's injected into the mold cavity. So that's the part that keeps the bubbles out, and that's the part that keeps pushing everything through, back and through.
And as it kind of moves along, it gets hotter and hotter and more molten,
Yes.
yes, right?
Yes, yes.
Right, got it.
So they're the pellets, as you can see, and then once it pushes through, it starts to melt, and that becomes the molten plastic, which then there's the nozzle. These blue lines here are the cooling, they'll be the cooling channels.
Is that just with water normally?
Normally, yeah, yeah. So this will be a steel mold. So that's the injection pushing it through. Then it's cooled. Dosing is when the screw reverts back into its original position, and then it falls into the loading bay.
Right, and those little pins that are on springs there, those are those ejector pins that you're talking
Yes.
about. So as it cools, do you guys see how those pins kind of push the product out? See how those pins kind of
So yeah,
come
they
out,
push.
pushes it out. So those are ejector pins. And we also have, I don't know if it's called a pin, but we do have injection points, right? Because I can see there's like some excess plastic probably hanging off of this product.
Yes.
Where the plastic is actually injected as well.
Yes, so the injector points are, so when you are designing for manufacture, you need to make sure that you don't put it on the sides you want your appearance. So you probably put it on underneath the product rather than on top. Otherwise, you will get injector pins, like little indents that show injector pins have pushed it out, because the plastic is cooled, but it still kind of stamps into it.
Raphael has a question. How many
Yeah.
parts can be produced by one mold before you have to change it? I think, as kind of mentioned before, Raphael, that has to do with the type of injection mold that you purchase, as well as, you know, how many parts that one mold can produce at a time, and how often you're producing. So it can fluctuate.
Yeah. Yes.
Cool.
Any more questions?
None at the moment.
Okay, yeah, it's fine. So this is the bottle cap video I was telling you. So this is how injection molding works, and these are produced every 2 seconds.
Awesome. So good to know as well. For something, say like a water bottle, you'd probably have to produce both parts separately, the cap and the bottle, correct? Would each have to have
Yes,
a plastic injection mold?
yes. So I will explain later how plastic bottles are different to manufacture, which I will explain later.
Cool.
I've got 2 processes to how they're made. So yeah, this is the injection molding. So this is called rapid injection molding. As you can see, they are produced very quickly, every 2 seconds. The injector pins are there, but then you just push through, and then they go onto a conveyor belt. The blue wires are the coolers, and the red wires are the heaters.
Wow.
So yeah, they're really quick to produce.
And it looks like the push pin is just kind of the whole bottle cap, like the inside, it just pushes out kind of that whole round circle, I guess.
Yes. Yes. So what it does is it clamps the plastic into the mold, and then once the plastic's cooled, then it releases.
Amazing. Awesome.
So for designing for injection molding, there are a few things you need to take into consideration. So there are ribs. Ribs are added to increase the strength of a part. Ribs should have a maximum thickness of 0.5 times the wall thickness. So the wall thickness is how thick you want the plastic to be. So for those bottle caps, it would probably be a mil. So it's how thick the actual material is when produced. So if you needed ribs, then they should have a maximum thickness of 0.5 times the wall thickness and a maximum height of 3 times the wall thickness. Ribs should also have round edges to prevent parts from having sink marks. So wall thickness in a bit more detail is a uniform wall thickness is required to ensure consistent cosmetic and strength of the part. If it's too thick, it will cause sink marks, warp, or internal voids. If it's too thin, the molten plastic may harden before filling the mold cavity issues with the part. If multiple thicknesses are required, then the designer should make the transition as smooth as possible. This allows the material to flow easily and consistently within the mold. Draft is incredibly important with injection molding. Draft angles must be added to all vertical walls. So this allows the part to be ejected from the mold with ease. If there's problems with the draft, it will prevent the part from being able to remove, and the mold will possibly have drag marks on it. So ideally, you would put draft on every part if you can, just to prevent the parts when they come out having drag marks. So the required draft for every 25 millimeters of cavity depth is at least 1 degree, but more draft the better, as this prevents consistent wear and tear to the part. Also, if the surface is textured, the draft should be increased. With injection molding as well, round edges are key. So round edges allow the material to flow around the mold cavity. Sharp edges cause strength considerations in the part, which affects the material flow around the mold. It is recommended that edges are round to a minimum of 0.5 the wall thickness for internal walls and 1.5 times the wall thickness for the external edges. A lot of people use text or logos on their injection molding. So text is most commonly used injection molding for the part to be marked with the client's logo. It's recommended to emboss the text rather than deboss it, as it makes it easier for the tool to be CNC machined. Although logos and text can be debossed, but it is more expensive. Embossing text should be a minimum of 0.5 mil with a font height of 5 mil. Also undercuts should be avoided if possible, as they prevent the part being pulled out straight from the mold. So instead of getting pulled out straight, if there's an undercut, what it would do is it would make it a lot harder to pull apart than if it was just no undercuts. So it would just come out with these. However, there are ways of having undercuts, but this can be more expensive.
Holy smokes, that's a lot of information. Maybe let's just go through these one by one and see if we can get this in layman's terms. Oh my goodness. Okay, let's start with number 1 here, ribs. So ribs are added to increase strength. Is this the blue picture kind of in the middle that you're talking about, like those little rib things? Is that?
Yeah, they are ribs, yeah.
Okay, cool. So what we use those ribs for is basically to increase the strength of a product, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Now, wall thickness, this is going to be like how thick the plastic part is. And if it's too thick, it could cause what are called sink marks, which is basically when the plastic cools, it kind of sinks in on itself because it didn't fill properly. It warps. Is that a good summary? Would you say?
Yeah, so sink marks are like it kind of bows. So there'll be sink marks in terms of the product, the plastic's too heavy and there's nothing to support it underneath. So the plastic will bow in the middle, or so it won't be what you desired.
Right. So it's kind of like caves in on itself.
Yes.
Almost.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, not cool. We don't want that, but okay. Cool. And then in terms of like, multiple thicknesses. So if you have a product that is going to have different thicknesses, we need to make it a very smooth transition, because I would imagine looking at most plastic products, the thickness is almost, I'm just looking around at my desk here and it looks like, they're almost always like kind of the same sort of thickness. So that's good to know. Now let's talk about draft angles for a second here as well. can we try to explain draft a little bit more simply?
Yeah,
What-
so
what that
draft
look
is draft's like a taper. So as you can see on the pictures, a poor draft is when it goes in. A challenging draft is like a standard vertical wall, and a positive draft is when it tapers in like a plant pot kind of design. So that would be the ideal draft angle that you'd want. Just so instead of the product, if you had a mold and the mold was trying to come off the one that says challenging underneath, that would be quite a struggle because it could cause drag marks. Whereas if the mold is inside, it on the ideal one, it would pull apart quite easily because it's smaller than the actual part. If that makes sense.
Got it. So draft is going to be like the angle of the walls of the product. Because
Yes.
if it looks like the pour one that we see there, if we picture the plastic injection mold filling that empty space in the middle, it's going to kind of have to push it a bit harder to get it off,
Yeah.
to get it out of the plastic injection mold. And if we're putting like more force on that, it's going to cause what are the drag marks within that
Yes.
inner wall, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Whereas the ideal angle, the way that it's angled kind of like a plant pot, it would just pop out of the mold way easier. There's less force, so you're not going to get those imperfections, correct?
Yes. So if you had a cube and you were trying to get it out of the ideal one, once it gets to a certain point, because it's angled away from it, you'd be able to pull it out with ease. Whereas if you've got it straight up, then it would constantly drag all the way up.
Right. So by the sounds of it, you shouldn't ever have a perfectly, say, square type of
No.
angle, right?
Yeah.
And that leads into these rounding edges that you're talking about. Because a lot of times when people are designing things, if they want it to look like modern or like really like geometric, people are going to have very sharp angles, but that's actually not good for plastic injection molding, correct?
Right. Yes.
Right. So any sort of like sharp edge actually does need to be rounded both internally and externally, like you guys can see on the bottom right picture, so that it actually pops out of the plastic injection mold better and actually makes the shape better. Is that correct, Emily?
Yeah. So when the plastic's injected into the mold, if it has sharp corners, it might miss an edge. So that could be a problem, as well as whereas if they've got a corner that's rounded, it's more likely to just fill it and not have any problems.
Issues, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So most of the time when we look at plastic products, if we look at plastic products that we think like, oh, like that's kind of like, a 90-degree angle. In fact, if you were to actually look at the design and really get down to it, maybe it's not quite like a 90-degree angle. It actually does have a slight curve to it, right down to the millimeters. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that is. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then moving on to the adding text and logos, for anyone that doesn't understand the terms emboss or deboss, basically what this means is emboss means that a design is coming out of the plastic, whereas deboss means that the design is like pressed into the plastic. And what's being explained here is saying, like, say you want to put your logo on something, right? If you have the text coming out of the plastic, which is called embossing, I believe that is recommended versus having the text going into the plastic, correct? Because it's easier and cheaper
Yes.
to have it made that way, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Cool. And then last thing here, undercuts. Undercuts, would that just mean kind of like a product that maybe has some sort of weird hook on it that's kind of like,
Yeah. So it's like an overhang.
yeah, like
So anything
curling
that kind of-
around or something?
Yes.
Then it's hard
Yeah.
to pull off because the curl is
Yeah.
like preventing it from popping it off.
Just pulling
right?
up. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, cool, awesome. Jeffrey has a question here. If I needed a pour design, which is an acute angle, can I push it at that 90 degrees instead of up and down? Like, is there ever a situation where somebody has to have, say, that pour angle, or is that just kind of a faulty design?
So you would struggle to do that. I'm not going to say it's not possible, but you probably would get drag marks on it. If they're on the inside, maybe that wouldn't bother you as much if that's you were more focused on the outside. But it depends how poor the angle was. So if there was negative draft, there was so much you wouldn't even pull it off the mold.
Right.
It wouldn't even come off.
Gotcha. And Finn just has a clarification question. You mean raised up on the plastic? Yes. So embossed means raised up. So it's coming out of the plastic. That's embossed. Like you can feel it raised when you run your finger over it. Deboss is it's going into the plastic. So it's like a canyon, like it's going inward. Cool. All right. I think we got most of these things kind of talked out. Crack on, Emily.
Sorry if it's a bit complicated.
Oh, that's okay. That's why you're here, is we need to understand and know this, because as people that are, you know, potentially developing custom products, these are things that, you know, people need to know for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Let's continue.
Okay, so pad printing is a very simple, quick, and affordable painting process for adding color to plastic injection molded parts. It's used to create a pad printing process. A large pad is created, incorporating a raised design that will pick up the paint, then apply it to the plastic. The printing machine uses heat to transfer the image from the flat printing plate to the part. The process is also referred as stamping, which is a very simple way of putting it. So it just works exactly the same as a stamp. Pad printing is a secondary process which is applied to the part after it's been injection molded. The advantages of pad printing are the process can print onto any surface, including uneven, as well as very small surfaces. Also, it delivers a high quality crisp finish and is compatible with any materials. Pad printing is a more expensive method than embossing the design onto the part. However, it does prevent thin areas and undercuts, which cause issues. So pad printing is most commonly used in the medical, automotive, and electrical industries. As you can see, there's a few examples there of how pad printing looks when it's been done. So it's just stamped on, basically. This is a quick video here of how it works as well. So the first print is then going on, and then there's another color. So it just dips into the different colors.
Stamp.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly.
So if you have something that's like multiple colors, that could potentially like increase the price because it's having to be stamped like 4 times for 4 colors.
Yes. So they have different pads for different printing. So it would be different stamps. So you need 4 different stamps if you wanted 4 different colors.
Gotcha. So if I'm somebody who's like, hey, I want my logo on my product, we kind of have 2 different options here. We can actually build that logo into the plastic injection mold design itself, and it can be either embossed or debossed, going in or out of the plastic. But our other option is to do pad printing, which is stamping that design onto the plastic. And depending on how many colors we have, depends how many stamps it is, which can be, pad printing is better maybe for more complicated designs, but your supplier actually has to take that product and then do something with it. So it's another step which could increase cost, correct?
Yes, yeah. So it's a secondary process. So yeah, we'll add cost to the product.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Okay. So injection molding uses different materials. So the most common are nylon, HDPE, PCP, PP, acrylic, and ABS. They all have different properties, as this is so that's important that you research into this before manufacturing a product. So, for example, as you can see here, the appearance of acrylic is clear, whereas the appearance of ABS is not. So you need to think about that before you design a product.
like PP and ABS, they both look like you can't see through them.
Yes.
How would you know? Like how, like if you're just someone coming to the table with like an idea, how do you go about researching what to make your product out of?
So you could either contact the manufacturer, who will probably tell you which one would be best for what you're looking for. So it does depend on the product you are designing. Or you can research online. I think there's a lot of information about the properties of product materials and which products they are most used for.
Okay, cool. Carrie has a great question here. If toxicity is something that's important to you, which material would be best to use?
So probably polypropylene, I think. That's a good question, actually.
But you would want to
It's
do your research on each of those and understand what it's actually made out of chemically, and understand, you know, what aspect of that would be causing toxicity.
yeah. So there's design guides online that will tell you about materials and their properties, and it'll tell you everything about them.
Gotcha. Awesome. And I have another question from Jeffrey earlier. Can plastic injection moldings accommodate the corn PLA? Yes, it can. I know that from personal experience. Awesome. Hannon has a question, not to be disrespectful, but do we really need to know all this stuff? Or do we hire a professional like Emily? Yes. So guys, this is for more advanced students, okay? Do I recommend that you do this for your first product? No, absolutely not. Do not design a custom product for your first product that you sell on Amazon, okay? This is for sellers that have maybe, you know, have a few products on Amazon. They understand communicating with suppliers. They're, you know, ready to take things maybe to the next level. This whole process is very expensive. And all of this is just important knowledge for you to know. But at the end of the day, yes, if you're designing a plastic injection mold and going through this process, you would want to hire a professional like Emily. You know, I can't sit here by myself at my desk with no design background and go through this process of designing a plastic injection mold and really know what I'm doing. But it's important for me as the person who's actually investing into this product to know everything that Emily is talking about. So that's kind of the point. So that when you do hire a professional like Emily and she's talking to you saying, hey, Sam, this angle is too sharp, you know, it's going to cause an issue with the plastic injection mold. You're like, oh, right, I understand why, right? That's the whole idea behind today's presentation. And then Raphael is asking, which material is the strongest one to make for power tool handles? I'm not sure if you know all the materials in the world, Emily, that might be, you know, you need to Google it. You need to.
Yeah. I think I'd say ABS is probably the strongest, but I'm not sure what they use for power tools. I'm going to be honest, I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things would be that you'd probably want to take a look with your manufacturer and actually ask them, because they would probably know best.
Yeah, even I ask manufacturers sometimes, you know, what would you recommend? What do you think is the best? Because they're experts in it, so they know exactly what they're talking about.
Exactly. Emily is more on the design side of things, guys, right? So she's the one who designs the molds to make sure all the angles are right, to make sure it's going to pop out of the mold correctly, all of that jazz. What material is actually put into that mold? You do want to have a conversation with your supplier about that.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
So injection molding is used for manufacturing plastic products for a range of different industries. As you can see, it's used to design syringes for the medical industry, casing for electrical products, plastic cutlery and utensils, children's toys, and the automotive industry. However, plastic bottles are different. Although they are injection molded, plastic bottles are a two-stage process. Firstly, they are injection molded into a preform, and then they are preform blow molded, which the preform is heated and then blow molded into a bottle. So the preform is a lot smaller, and then it's blow molded. So that's another manufacturing process you can use, and they are blow molded to just increase the size and make the actual shape of the water bottle.
Amazing. Who knew there was a 2-step to making water bottles?
I've got a quick bit about rotational molding as well.
Cool.
To go through that. Okay, so rotomolding is very different from injection molding. It is still a manufacturing process for manufacturing plastic, but there are a few differences. So rotational molding is a manufacturing process used to make hollow thermoplastic one-piece products. It uses the process of heating and cooling on an axially rotational split hollow cavity mold, which defines the outer shape of the part. When designing for rotational molding, it is important to make sure that if it's a standard single skin rotational molding, any detail added to the inside will not show on the design. So logos and things have to be on the outside of the design for rotational molding. So the advantage to rotational molding is the low initial investment cost required to produce a part. So this is due to the low operating pressures, which makes the tooling costs considerably lower. However, rotational molding has a higher cycle time, which means it can take up to 3 hours to complete one part. Another advantage of rotational molding is the uniform wall thickness. Due to the consistent rotation of the mold, it coats the walls evenly, which increases the product strength. However, the soft aluminium used to manufacture the tools means the tooling needs replacing after every 3,000 cycles to maintain the high quality finish of the part. So for rotational molding tools, the average price ranges from $3,000 to $30,000, which is considerably lower than injection molding, which ranged from $5,000 to $100,000. However, this does depend on the size of the part, which can increase the tooling cost significantly. Although rotational molding is your only option for large parts due to the large capacity. So as you can see in the pictures, they are large. It's for large products, so water tanks and things like that are rotational molded.
Really kind of bigger products. This wouldn't be for, maybe the smaller products that you get off of Amazon. This is like your big household items.
Yeah, you can do smaller products, but it is mainly for larger products with which are really quite complex.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
So rotational molding is used for producing hollow parts by adding plastic powder to a shell-like mold. The mold is then rotated and heated simultaneously to form the shape of the part. During the process, the powder fuses into a bubble-free liquid layer that takes the form of the inner mold surface. This part is then cooled and the hollow part is removed.
Right. So if you think about maybe a hot water tank or something like that, I don't know, you could inject the material in there and it just rotates and coats the edges, and then the mold kind of separates from itself, releasing the product, but inside the product it's totally hollow, correct?
Yeah, so it's like an Easter egg. So it's as the shell of the Easter egg is quite thin, there's a hollow, isn't it? So there's nothing inside.
Right. Okay, cool.
So how rotational molding works. Rotational molding is most commonly known as rotomolding. Rotational molding is a plastic casting technique used to produce large, hollow, seamless, and double-walled parts. The process involves a mold on a rotating frame, a heating chamber, and a cooling chamber. Rotational molded parts are high quality and are known for their durability and strength. The raw materials, most commonly polyethylene resin powder, is poured into an aluminium mold to start the rotational molding process. The frame of the mold is capable of rotating the mold to every point of the rotational axis. The mold is then loaded into a heating chamber where it is axially rotated whilst heating. As it rotates, the resin coats the mold evenly, giving the finished part an equal wall thickness across the surface. Once the mold has finished rotating, the mold is removed from the heating chamber and moved into a cooling chamber. The melted resin is then cooled before the part is removed from the mold. Once the part has been removed from the mold, the knife edge is cut out to remove the core and to create the hollow part. The molds for rotational molding are specifically designed and are capable of producing single and double wall products. The advantages of rotational molding is quick tooling. Due to the process being low pressured without any need for injection or in mold cooling, the average time the tooling process takes to create a new mold is 4 to 10 weeks, depending on the design, size, and complexity. The cast aluminium manufactured molds are very easy to use, especially for cooling. This is due to the aluminium molds transferring heat efficiently. The tooling process and production cost for rotational molding is less expensive than plastic manufacturing methods. So designers send the CAD file to the manufacturers to produce the part. The designer uses CAD to work out an estimated weight of the part to receive a quotation. Once the tool designer has checked the weight, a tool is designed ready for rotational molding the part. It's important to note that for injection molding, part is shelled on CAD to create the wall thickness. However, as the wall thickness isn't guaranteed, the part is sent as a solid to the manufacturer to work out the amount of powder required to get the desired wall thickness.
Right. So it almost seems like, for the most part, you have to have everything designed out and sent to your supplier so that they can calculate, how much material, how much time, all of that jazz. You need to kind of have the design ready to go for your supplier before they could ever give you an accurate quote. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Right. Gotcha. Kennedy does have a good question. Can we just work with a designer to design the product and then send it to the manufacturer? Or do we have to work with someone like Emily to do everything regarding the molding process? This is a fantastic question because I actually went through this with my toothbrush. So what happened with me is I, went on Fiverr, found a designer. I got someone to make the most beautiful, 3D render of this toothbrush and everything. And I sent it to my supplier and they're like, we can't use those files. Like, this is not ready for injection molding, which is actually how I ended up meeting Emily in the first place, is because I was looking for someone that could help me create those types of files. So you do need to work with someone like Emily in order to fully design something that's ready for manufacturer and ready to give to your supplier so that they can create the plastic injection mold. Now, most suppliers will have their own engineers that might make tweaks to it depending on the product, depending on the tools that they have. But they do need a pretty good design that is plastic injection mold ready, which is something that Emily does. And maybe you can touch on that as well, Emily, what the process looks like.
Yeah, so there are different kinds of designers. There's designers that design products to look and, to go on websites and things. I do that myself as well. But when it comes to actual modeling for injection molding, you have to be careful if they have manufacturing experience, because a lot of people don't know about draft, don't know about anything really about undercuts and things like that. So you have to be careful who you select for your designer.
Absolutely. Because imagine, guys, if you create a design, and remember how we were talking about, having those, minute details, like you can't have a perfect right angle, right? If you have that, it's going to look like crap when the product is ejected from the mold, because, there's going to be drag marks on it, or there might be sinkholes if, the plastic is too thick, right? So yes, some designers could create the file to hand to the supplier to actually go ahead and make the plastic injection mold. But if that designer doesn't actually know about draft, about, the angles, about everything that Emily's talked about so far, if they don't have experience with that, they're not going to make those slight little tweaks within the design and recommend things to you, that could save you thousands of dollars, right? Because if you screw it up, you have to go back to the drawing board, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the tools are quite expensive as well, so definitely.
Absolutely. And Kennedy's saying, I was excited about my idea, but now I'm sad. That's a lot. It sounds like a lot. Don't be sad about it. This entire session today, guys, is not to overwhelm you. It's to empower you with knowledge so that as a business owner, you don't need to actually know how to do all of this, okay? You just need to know, hey, if I'm planning to make a custom product, I need to hire somebody like Emily who actually knows what's going on to do my idea, not some random person off Fiverr, okay? This is all about empowerment and knowledge and just understanding all of the different parts that come with injection molding. So it's not, don't feel sad about an idea. If you have an awesome idea, you just need to talk to somebody like Emily to actually design it properly, right? That's all it is. Cool. Let's move on. This is great
Okay.
information.
Okay, so rotational molding process. So the low pressure and high heat used in rotational molding means that rotational molding tooling is produced out of aluminium, and the resin used in the process is polyethylene. As it is low chemical degradation when exposed to heat, the rotational molding process has 5 stages. So the first stage is filling. The hollow mold is filled with powdered plastic resin. Stage 2 is the rotation. So the rotation is starts to rotate and is transferred into the oven. Stage 3 is melting the resin. So the mold continues to rotate in the oven where the resin melts and coats the walls of the mold. Stage 4 is cooling. So the mold is then cooled until the resin hardens into a part design shape. And then stage 5 is molding, so the mold opening. So the mold rotation is stopped and the mold is opened to release the finished part. If the part has a knife edge, these parts are carved onto carved and then create the openings.
Amazing.
So this is some diagram of how it actually works. So the mold is filled with the plastic powder, which you can see, and then the mold is then closed. Then 2 is heating. So the mold is then loaded into an oven where hot air is blown at it, and it rotates at the same time as the hot air heats the plastic to melt it to coat around the outside. The mold is then cooled, and it still rotates while cold air is blowing at it. And then stage 4 is demolding or removing the part. So the part is then demolded and removed, and then it's distributed to the client.
Amazing.
It's just a little short video now about how it works. So the mold is filled with the plastic powder. Then it enters a heating chamber to form molten plastic and is rotated to coat the mold. The mold then enters the cooling chamber where fans are used to cool and solidify the plastic. Once cooled, the part is removed from the mold and passed over to the distribution.
Amazing.
Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense with that diagram.
Yeah, this is great. I didn't even know about this type of injection molding. Very cool.
So this is just a quick video on how kayaks are made. So kayaks are obviously a large part and they are rotomolded. So it's just a quick video about how they're made.
Right, because they have to have air inside of them.
Yes. So the plastic powder is poured into the aluminium mold, as you can see here. Then the secondary plastic powder is added. So this would be for the inner parts of the hollow area. So if you wanted the hollow bit to be a different color, then this is where you'd add that color to.
Right.
The mold is then closed and tightened using clamps to make sure it's securely fit. The mold then goes into an oven where the plastic powder is melted.
And it's put on those rotations too, so it can start rotating.
Yeah, so the mold is then rotated to coat the walls of the mold evenly with powdered plastic. The oven is then turned on and programmed to rotate depending on the wall thickness. So if you want a thicker wall thickness, then you'd use more powder. If you wanted a thinner wall thickness, you'd use less powder.
Got it.
So that's it, just rotated.
Rotated in it, and it's also rotated outside. Oh, yeah. Folks, that's crazy.
So yeah, it takes a while to rotate and get all the plastic around the outside of the mold.
Right. So obviously making something like a canoe, you can't pump like, like the bottle caps. You can't pump one of these out every 2 seconds. This takes
No,
time.
yeah, this takes a long time. Yeah.
Right.
So then
Okay.
the oven is opened and the mold is then taken out, which you can see them doing now. Again, it's a long process.
No wonder kayaks are so expensive. I have a deeper appreciation for it now.
So the mold is then removed once it's been removed from the oven, it's placed into the cooling station where cold air fans are blown at it to cool it quickly.
Right.
Then it's removed from there, the mold's taken apart, and then the product is taken out.
And is anything that's like hollow made like this, whether it's big or small, is this kind of the same process?
Yeah, a lot of hollow products are, yeah. So as you can see, this is the knife out process. So it's been knifed out the core.
Wow.
So yeah, that's how kayaks are made.
Amazing. So if you're someone that is looking at making some sort of hollow product, this is the kind of molding that you would need versus the injection molding.
Yes, and it's a lot cheaper as well.
Interesting. Okay.
Again, designing for rotational molding, there are different aspects that you have to consider. So there are inserts. So metal inserts are commonly used in rotational molding to provide anchor points for the other hardware, such as handles and hinges. Metal inserts are available in all shapes and sizes, depending on the part's requirements. Again, as they were used in injection molding, ribs are used for rotational molding to increase product stiffness without increasing the part weight. The ribs are designed as hollow, similar to corrugated sheets, as they cannot be manufactured as solid due to the process, because obviously it's a hollow process of manufacturing plastic.
Right.
It is recommended that rib heights are 4 times the wall thickness and 5 times the wall thickness, which you can see in the picture on the left at the bottom.
Got it.
There's also kiss-offs as well. A kiss-off is a solid reinforcing structure that transmits a load from a nominal wall to another. It is used on rotational molded parts to increase stiffness. They are used individually or in a pattern and will outperform ribs. Kiss-offs can be seen in the second picture across. So it's just where ribs are connected, but it gives that extra thickness of plastic, so it makes it a lot stronger.
Got it. Okay.
Undercuts again are used. So undercut is a wall projecting inwards or outwards parallel to the part, so like an overhang. Undercuts make the removal of the product from the mold difficult. However, rotational molding uses a hollow female tool. There's no male tool like in injection molding where there's 2 molds. There's only one, which is the outside mold. So therefore, shrinking during the molding can enable undercuts to be removed from the product. So once the product's taken off the mold, it shrinks. So you have to take that into consideration when you are designing for rotational molding. The product will shrink.
Got it. Good to know.
So again, wall thickness. So rotational molding only uses a female tool. Therefore, there is no male tool. The material flow characteristics on the outer corners of the rotational mold part tend to have a thicker nominal wall than the rest of the part. Although generally the process produces relatively even wall thickness, the usual wall for rotational mold part ranges from 3 to 10 mil. So it's not guaranteed what your wall thickness is because there's no male tool part. So you are just basing it off the amount of powder that you use and how many rotations it does. Again, with rotational molding, it's 3 mil is the minimum really. So if you're looking to injection mold a part that's got 1 mil wall thickness, injection molding would be the better option for that. Another thing to take into consideration is flatness. So the flatness of the part is subject to the cooling process. So rotational molding parts try to avoid large flat areas, as when the part cools, this can cause warping and sink marks. So again, it starts to cave in. Right. So anything, because they're so big, any flat surface will bow and cave in. So to prevent that from happening, large surfaces should be broken into sections using reinforced ribs or have a gentle curvature. So even the slightest curve rather than a completely flat, large surface will stop the product from bowing. If not possible, there are steel rods to be used during the cooling process to insert into the part to prevent bowing. However, these are very expensive. It's not guaranteed to work.
Right. So kind of a common theme here with any sort of plastic injection molding is we want to stay away from really flat stuff, anything with super hard angles, down to these minute details where, it's in the millimeters. So you don't really detect these changes by the eye, right? And that's what you mean by that gentle curvature. Like it's just ever so slight. It's not just dead flat. It's like an ever so slight curvature, but maybe, me just looking at it, it might look pretty straight, but maybe it's not quite exactly straight.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah.
Got it. Amazing. Cool.
Okay. Again, radii corners. So they distribute the stress on corners to add strength to the part. So again, the same as injection molding, you do want large corners that are rounded. So designers should minimize sharp corners or edges for rotational molding. It is recommended that the inner corner shouldn't be less than 25% of the wall thickness. The outer wall corner should be the nominal thickness plus the inner corner. For example, if the wall thickness is 3 mil and the inner corner is 1 mil, then you would have the outer corner as 4 mil. So you'd add the inner corner plus the 3 mil wall thickness to create the perfect outer corner. So that would be 4 mil.
Got it.
So then it has a consistency of flow around the mold. Tolerance, it's difficult to hold rotational molding parts to tight tolerances as the outer dimensions are free to draw away from the insert surface of the tool as the plastic cools and shrinks. A commercial tolerance rotational molding would be 2 to 3% and a precision tolerance would be 1%. So you can't guarantee that you're going to get a 3 mil wall thickness. It could be 4 mil, it could be 5 mil. It just depends. They try and get it as close as possible, but it doesn't always work. So it's not as accurate as injection molding.
Right. So if I'm doing this rotational molding, maybe product to product, they might be ever so slightly just a little bit different.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they could be 3 mil, it could be one that's 4 mil, it could be one. There's not much difference. You probably wouldn't be able to tell really between them, but they won't all be. With injection molding, they're all identical parts. So every time they produce, they are identical. Whereas with rotational molding, they do differ.
Awesome. Cool.
So for texture, the product's surface finish is created by the mold surface. Therefore, the pattern is etched into the aluminium tooling. So there's something called shot peening, which is like a rough texture. It's just a texture that they add on. It's like the most common one. That's quite a low cost texture. Whereas if you have photo etching to produce a more aesthetically pleasing surface. So for example, if you wanted to design a bin that has like a wood grain, you would have to etch that into the mold, and that would cost a lot more than it would if it was just a plain surface.
Kind of texture to injection molding?
They add texture in different ways to injection molding. I think you can do it, but it's really expensive. Again, with the same thing, and it's more common on rotational molding. I think you can do it on injection molding.
Gotcha.
But it's not as common. So walls, there are two options for rotational molded walls. So you've got a single skin and a double skin. A single skin is the standard rotational molding process using the outer wall to create the desired shape. So that has the female tool. So that just creates the outside. Whereas a double skin allows the designer to have a detail on both the outside and the inside of the mold. However, this is considerably more expensive. So with double skin molding, you can have details on the inside, but it is a lot. It's twice the price of if you got a single skin. So if you wanted to make a cheap product, you'd have it single skin. Whereas if you wanted something that was expensive, then you'd have, if you want something really detailed, then that would have a double skin, but it would cost double the amount of a single skin.
Amazing. Awesome.
So for rotational molding color, they offer a range of colors for the part to be manufactured from. The color is dependent on the plastic powder used, which can be seen in the picture on the right, different colors. If the manufacturer doesn't have the desired color in stock, this will increase the cost significantly, as they'll have to order it in for your part. So most of the time they have standard colors as black. However, if you really wanted something that was blue, they would order it in, but it would cost a lot of money. And also with draft, again, when the part cools, it shrinks away from the mold, making it easier to remove. Therefore, rotational molded parts can be designed without draft. The ribs are added to increase the strength of a part. However, it is recommended the parts have draft of 2 degrees to prevent part difficulty removing the mold. So you can get away with having no draft on rotational molding parts, unlike injection molded parts. However, if you don't have so for injection molding, if you don't have draft, you get the drag marks, whereas with rotational molding you might not get drag marks. However, it is recommended that you have a 2 degree just to make sure you definitely don't get any drag marks from the mold.
Just to kind of like know what's going on, guys. And again, this would not be your job to do this. This is why you hire a designer like Emily to make sure that, you know, all of this has gone over, right? And just another touch on the color aspect of things, knowing that if you're going to be producing a product in several different colors, that there can also be costs associated with cleaning the mold between color changes too. I had to learn that the hard way. So if you're planning to produce a product in multiple colors, just be aware that, you know, your supplier has to stop production and wash the mold, in my case, 5 times over to fully clean the color out, as well as when a plastic injection mold is not running, it's not making money, right? So you might have higher costs associated with that too.
Yeah.
Cool. And I think we're kind of almost like we're a little bit past the hour mark here, Emily, and I want to make sure that we're respecting your time. Would you want to keep going, or would you want to, you know, wrap up the call here, or what would be your preference? I'm not sure how much more you prepared for us.
There's only a few. I think there's a few more slides. I'm happy to continue if everybody wants me to. It's up to everybody else.
Absolutely. No, this is a recorded call, so this is going to be you know, posted within our course, because I know there's several students that couldn't make it today. So if you're all right, I'm okay. We can continue. Let's go for it.
Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Cool.
So the most common material used for rotational molding is polyethylene. There are a few types of polyethylene, including high density, medium density, low density, and linear low density. If you are manufacturing a part, you do need to make sure you're checking the properties again of the material to ensure it is the correct material for your part. So just you can check online, or you can contact your manufacturer and they'll just explain if you want something high density, or if you want it low density, or if you want it strong, or if you want it lightweight. It just depends on the properties you're looking for.
That you'd want to be asking the person who's designing the product. Again, guys, that's a question for the supplier.
Yeah. So rotational molding products examples. Rotational molding is used for plant pots, furniture, kayaks, and oil tanks. So anything that you want, really. There's a lot of products you can make out of rotational molding, and it is cheaper than injection molding. It's also very popular in the automotive and construction industries. This is due to it being suitable for more larger products and outdoor products. So rotational molding is it's advised that if you want a product for outside, you would use rotational molding as your process.
Awesome.
I think this is the last slide.
Okay,
It's just a
cool.
few. So it's just a few differences between injection molding and rotational molding. As you can see, the advantages are that injection molding is lightweight. The injection molding process uses a lot less plastic than rotational molding. This makes injection molding parts a lot more lightweight compared to rotational molding parts. Also, injection molding is a faster production time, as you saw with the bottle caps. They're 2 seconds compared to the kayak, which was a lot longer to manufacture. So this is because injection molding uses high pressures, which increase production time. Therefore, injection molded parts are quicker to produce and distribute. Again, another advantage is more complex designs. The high pressures used in injection molding ensures the plastic fills every part of the mold. Therefore, injection molding creates more complex designs with ease. Excess plastics can be reused, so if that's something you're interested in, then both injection molding and rotational molding, the excess plastic is reused to create other plastic parts. More expensive tooling, so that's a disadvantage of injection molding. Injection molding requires stronger and more expensive molds due to the process using higher pressures. Injection molding tools are usually 15 to 20 times the cost of rotational molds, so that's definitely something to consider. Another disadvantage is less durability. So the injection molding process usually creates weaker and less durable parts, especially in outdoor conditions. And limited part size, again, injection molding capacity requirements are small, therefore initial costs of tooling and injection molding are a large part is very expensive. And then there's just a few advantages of rotational molding. So rotational molding is less expensive tooling initially. So rotational molding uses low pressures, therefore this process requires less expensive materials to create the molds. So rotational molding is also without any need of injection or in mold cooling, which reduces the initial cost significantly. It's also more durable, so rotational molded parts are stronger and more durable, and that's why they're recommended for the outdoor conditions. Therefore, rotational molding is used to manufacture products for all weather conditions. I know where I used to work before, they did salt bins, and they're in -30 conditions, and they still were absolutely fine. So rotational molding is a lot more durable than injection molding. And there's also no limit to the part size. As you've seen with the oil tanks and everything, they're large compared to injection molding machines. So this reduces the cost of manufacturing large parts. So if you are manufacturing something that's quite big, then definitely use rotational molding. Again, excess plastic can be reused with rotational molding. The disadvantages with rotational molding is rotational molding uses less pressure to create parts. Therefore, plastic is guaranteed to fill all the parts of the mold. For complex designs, injection molding is recommended. So if you've got a really complex design and it's not for outdoors, then I definitely recommend using injection molding. Also, it has a slower production time, as you saw with the canoe. It took a long time to produce. So rotational molding has a slower production time due to the low pressures used. Therefore, parts take longer to produce. It's also heavier as rotational molding uses more plastic than injection molding, so which makes it a lot more heavy.
Oh, my brain is blown. I don't know about you guys. This is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. So it looks like you have your email there, Emily. If people do have any sort of questions, they can shoot you an email.
Yes.
Which is fantastic. I'll just stop the screen share here too. And guys, just make sure that, you know, especially if you are thinking about hiring someone like Emily to custom make a product for you, you need to make sure that you've already done your product validation, both yourself at home and public validation as well before you sink money into this. So please, you know, don't be, you know, emailing Emily with an idea that you have not already publicly validated with your audience, because this would be I wouldn't want to say like a waste of time, but it would be putting the steps out of order. Okay, so please make sure that you have already gone through all of those steps that we do outline within the course. But yeah, does anyone have any questions right now? I guess I'll stop the screen share and we'll just kind of come back here. Any sort of questions right now for Emily before we wrap up today's call? Because that was mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
That's okay. It's a lot of information.
It is. It's a ton of information. But, you know, if you're ever looking for this kind of information, it's great to have like in one video.
Yeah.
Hector, I'm not sure if that's a question or a statement. Let me know. We always have to design a 3D. I would assume yes, it always does have to be 3D. Let me know if there's more on that question there, Hector. Any other questions, guys, at all for Emily before we call it a day? Looks like that's pretty much it. Guys, if you appreciated Emily coming in today with your expertise, please give a 1 in the chat. That's our virtual clap, because she is absolutely fantastic. And if you guys ever do want to hire her, again, her email is in the recording, and we will also post that in the resource section of the course. That was awesome. Thank you so much, Emily, for.
Oh, that's okay. No problem.
Today.
Thanks for having me.
That was awesome. Cool. Well, that being said, guys, we'll wrap it up. We'll see you in the next coaching call. Thank you again to Emily for your time today, and hope you all have a wonderful weekend coming up here, okay? Awesome. Bye, guys. Have a great rest of your day. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Negotiations. This can be very frustrating, or it can be also be very fun. A lot of people love this process. So I think generally speaking, negotiation is not just like, oh, how do I negotiate a Chinese supplier? It's actually learning the skill of negotiation, because if you're a good negotiator, you can negotiate from anything and everything, right? So if you're interested in actually getting like a masterclass in negotiation, check out the book, Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss. I'm going to put it up on the screen right here. Great book, cool stories. And I'm sure this is very applicable for even your salary negotiation or whatever it might be. So anyways, all it comes down to this negotiation is having as many different options as possible, is to see who has more leverage. If let's say if you're trying to sell on Amazon, you want to basically launch this product and you only have one option. There's only one factory in China that can produce this product for you. Well, anything they say goes. So if they want to charge you $5, you have to pay $5. If they want to charge you $10, you have $10. Why? Because you have no other options. Now, imagine that there's 500 suppliers that are willing to actually do this product for you. Well, now you have 500 options. So let's say the first one says $5. You're like, no, thank you. Next person says $4. Okay, let me try another one. Next person says $3. Now you can actually get them to compare and leverage against each other. So I think the most important thing about negotiation is really reaching out to enough factories. So earlier when we talked about, formulating your plan, formulating your product offering, going on Alibaba messaging suppliers, do not only message 1 or 2. I want you to message 5, 10, even up to 20 suppliers, because only by talking to so many, number one, you are actually going to learn so much more about your product. And number two, you are now going to have a lot more options when it comes to negotiation. Just more options is always better for everything, right?
All right, so just to frame this, I would also just say that what we're looking for here is, frankly, a long-term business partnership. And for me, I like to create win-wins. I don't like to get somebody so down to the bone that they're not able to be successful. So I always like to frame these conversations when we get into price, when we get into terms with a factor I really want to work with in production, with saying, hey, my goal here is a long-term partnership. My goal here is for both of us to be successful and grow together. And that, frankly, is very much the Chinese mentality. They're long-term thinkers, and they're looking for that partnership. And you don't want to screw over somebody that you're trying to have a partnership with, right? You want them to be successful. So you want to find that equilibrium where it's a win-win. It's not somebody has to lose to win. So that's one frame point. Couple like tactical strategies. We can get into this now in terms of tactics. Obviously, you want the lowest price. The lower the price is, that gives you more margin to play with. It gives you more room for mistakes, etc. So you want to have a low price. But how do you actually get to the lowest price when you've never placed a single order with somebody? First of all, I'll say that it's a lot easier after you've established a relationship and you've placed orders for 1, 2, 3 years. Because to Tom's point, you have leverage. You've got a relationship there. But there are some things that you can do upfront to get a lower price. My favorite strategy is, let's say that I'm planning on ordering 1,000 units of a product. In the RFQ process, or in that initial template that I send out, even though I'm looking for 1,000 units, I want to actually find out what their lowest potential price is as much upfront. And oftentimes there's going to be quantity discounts. That's just how a lot of Chinese manufacturers work. They want size and scale, and they're willing to give a lower price. So what I'll say is, I said I need a price production quote for 1,000 units. I need a production quote for 5,000 units. I need one for 10,000 units, and then I'll use an extreme example. It'll be 30,000 units, something like that. And they'll give you a spectrum of prices and all that. The price on the 30,000, that extreme case, even though you may not order that for 3, 4, 5 years, if ever, that's likely going to be their lowest price. So that when you get down the line after sampling and you move forward and you're going to order 1,000 units, you're going to know because they've showed their hand on what their low price is. So you're going to want to try to get as much as possible of that low price. So that's one way to get them to show their cards before you've actually placed a super large order. The other thing I would say here is there's non-monetary ways that you can negotiate. You know, you don't want to be splitting hairs a whole lot at this stage over a few pennies. There's some things that you can do to reduce costs in other ways. One way is, can you change the payment terms? So instead of, spending 30% up front and 70% when the product ships, hey, can I spend that 70% a month after it ships so that I've delayed the cash flow burden on my business? That's one way that you can do it. The other thing is, let's say you've had custom molds made. Like, let's say it was a $5,000 mold for the custom mold you wanted to make, and you didn't either have the money or didn't really want to fork over all that money initially. One thing I've done is like, hey, why don't I split the cost with you on the mold? And then once I hit 40,000 units, I won't have to pay that. And if I don't hit 40,000 units, I'll pay you the remaining 2,500. Or maybe you pay $2,500 up front and they add $1 for every unit that you order over time until the rest of that's paid. So in the case of 1,000 units, you'd basically spend $2,500 up front plus $1 extra on that first order. So look at some non-actual product cost ways that you can shave money and make things that your cash flow is improved and that you have better margins. And then also on the topic of payment terms, a very common approach with most factories in China is that you're going to have to pay 30% up front before they've even started production. And let's say it takes them 30 days to do production and then it goes on a boat. You'll typically have to pay the remaining 70% before it even ships. So this is common. You might be a little bit afraid, I don't want to put money out up front until I've actually seen the product. You're going to have to put a deposit down with every factory you work with in China. Again, these terms can be negotiated over time, but it's typically going to be after you've placed multiple orders. So 30-70% is a very common structure.
Yeah, so 30% deposit, 70% once it passes inspection is very common. And a lot of students are like, what about 50-50? Not as common, but like still doable. But one thing you should never do is give them 100% of your money up front. Because once you do that, if there's a mistake, you have no leverage and they'll be like, well, sorry, too bad. In this way, you put 30% deposit and something happens, they still want your 70% of the money. Therefore, they will actually go to bat and try to fix whatever the problem is.
Yeah. And then I'll just say 2 more points on negotiations that's a little bit more long-term. The stuff we talked about is really your upfront creating a new product. But after you've actually created a product, it doesn't end there. There's going to be negotiations down the line. So as you start to improve your volume, if you start getting consistent orders, you have a lot more leverage because you're bringing a lot more benefit to the business. So the door opens up for future negotiations after you've placed more orders. The other thing I would pay very close attention to is when you've placed your initial production order, make a note of any of the key materials that go into the product. So let's say that it's a steel product or there's some resin or plastic. Look at the market of that price for that material the time that you place production orders, because in 1-2 years from now, that price might be down 30%. And you want to be able to note that and have that conversation. A bigger one, though, is the RMB, which is the Chinese currency, to US dollar conversion rate. So you should make a note on your first production order, what is the exchange rate? And I've actually seen this a lot the last couple of years where I've seen basically 15 to 20% price reductions, because way back 3 years ago when I placed my first production order, the exchange rate RMB to US dollars was at a certain level, and it's actually improved 20, 30%. So I've gone back to them and said, hey, when we first produced this product, here's the exchange rate. It's now 20% better. I need you to pass those savings on to me. And you can do the same thing with raw materials and other costs. So make sure that it's a long-term process. It doesn't just start and end when you place your first order. It's something that can iterate over time and be a conversation over time.
Yeah, I mean, that's super, super important for you guys to do. It's like lumber, right? During COVID, because everybody's trying to build houses and supply chain shortage. Lumber, I'm not sure if you guys seen the chart, it went crazy. So imagine if you're a house builder, now the lumber costs have gone up, so it sucks for you, right? But your product is actually made of different materials as well, and those materials have different pricing. So you can actually check the pricing for each of these materials. If it's gone up, if it's gone down. A lot of suppliers actually, like one of the negotiation tactics they have, it's like, oh, on your next order, the price went up. I'm like, why? Because the material went up. Well, maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but you need to figure that out. And most of the time, what I would say, it's like, it's a very, I don't like that negotiation tactic by them. Now, of course, if the raw material actually did go up, they have every right to charge you more. But if it didn't go up, that's a really bad partner. You should find a new one. So just be like, call on their bluff, be like, no, it didn't go up. Like, we're going to find a new manufacturer. And 9 out of 10 times they're like, okay, just like stay with us type of thing. But the ongoing negotiation is super, super important. Highly recommend for you all to do that. And one last thing I would say is like the story of Elon Musk. So Elon Musk tried to start this SpaceX company, and he went to Russia to actually buy these rockets. And then the Russians were quoting him like, oh, 20 million, 25 million. He didn't have that much money. So what he's like, you know what? I'm just going to like build my own rocket. So what does it take to build my own rocket? What are different components of a rocket? What are like, how much would it cost for me to build my own rocket? And it turned out it was going to be far less. So for your product, you also need to take that Elon Musk approach of like, okay, they're quoting me like $5 for this product, but what's this product really made out of? How much is the raw material really is? Yeah, they want to make money, but like there needs to be a balance, right? So make sure you kind of understand, do some research with regards to the materials, and do what Adam said in terms of continuous negotiation. All right, so what if you have to deal with multiple factories for one product? So I'll give you a quick example of a product that I had. So I had a vitamin C serum. This vitamin C serum, we had a bottle supplier. So this one supplier was taking care of just the bottles because we had a really nice premium looking bottle. We had one supplier who was just taking care of the vitamin C production itself. Then we had a packaging supplier as well because we had really high standards when it comes to packaging. So now you're looking at actually 3 different components for one product. How do you deal with that? Well, in our case, what we did was our main supplier was actually the vitamin C serum supplier because ultimately that's where everything's going to get packaged and sent out. So the bottle supplier will send all the bottles to the vitamin C serum supplier. The packaging supplier will send everything to the vitamin C supplier. Once everything's there, then the vitamin C serum supplier is then going to put the bottle on the shelf and then have the vitamin C serum dispersed into the bottle. And then they wrap everything up and then that goes off to Amazon. So many times for your product, you could have a packaging supplier by itself. You could have, let's say, if you're bundling, right? You're launching like a cup plus whatever else. Well, now you have 2 suppliers you have to deal with. Usually you need to assign who's the main supplier. Now, how do you decide that? Usually the main supplier, first of all, it's kind of like a lot of times it's kind of common sense. Like in the vitamin C serum, it's the vitamin C serum. But a lot of times it's like, who are you paying the most amount of money to? So if you pay the most amount of money to, that's going to be your main guy that's going to be quarterbacking the entire thing. So you want to make sure everything gets sent to that one person and then obviously let them know, hey, I got other, suppliers that's going to be working with you. How I like to do this is like create a group chat so everybody's in the same conversation. And then everything gets sent to that one supplier, the main supplier. Everything gets packaged up and then off to Amazon it goes. So you place your 30% deposit. The Chinese manufacturer is starting to basically create products for you. Then they call you, say, hey, please send us the 70%, the rest of the remainder of the payment. But not so fast. You got to do something before that, which is called inspections. Inspections are basically just these inspection agencies in China. They will actually go to the factory and they will inspect your product to make sure that it's the right color, it's the right size, it's the right functionality, everything works, the quality is there, so on and so forth. And by the way, inspection, before you actually give your 30% deposit, you can actually do a factory inspection as well. So you can tell them, hey, can you just go into the factory to make sure they're legit? And they'll they probably not be able to take pictures and whatever, but they can tell you if they're legit or not. So that's another side side tip. But basically what they do, so all the inspection agencies that are in the resources, go check them out. Usually cost like 100 to 150 bucks for inspection. And what they will do is they will communicate with the supplier. Hey, we're the inspection company. We're coming on this date. We're going to inspect, Tom's product, Adam's product. And what they will do is they will just randomly draw like 10%. They're not going to inspect everything. They'll draw 10%. It is your job as the Amazon seller to tell them exactly what needs to be looked out for. So this is why like using ChatGPT to understand what are some of the customer complaints about the product, it's so important. Make sure that they check all those complaints. That's where all the negative reviews are collected. So you want to make sure that your product doesn't have those issues. So it's normal to have a less than 5% defective rate, meaning if they went through 100 units and if 5 of them are not up to your standards, that is fine, right? There's going to be human errors, that's fine. But anything more than that, like 8, 10, 20, that's becoming an issue. So what you need to do is, hey, before I send you the 70% deposit, you actually need to fix all these different issues because I can't send you the 70% deposit. You didn't live up to your end of the bargain. So that's the purpose of an inspection.
Yeah, and Tom, I think one other thing in terms of the defect, I think, when you first initially are placing orders, especially, you can kind of freak out when you see those numbers like, oh crap, there's defectives. What I will say about these inspection companies, it's mind-blowing how detailed they are. Yeah. They are so good at really taking a fine-tooth comb when they evaluate things. So a defection could literally be a mark or a rub on a product, or it could be the packaging had one little scratch on it, but the product's fine. So you also want to not only look at the percentage of products that are impacted, but what are the kind of errors and issues. Obviously, if it's a critical function that's not working, highly concerning. Obviously, if the color was completely wrong, highly concerning. If the product was cracking after they did particular stress tests, highly concerning. But oftentimes these will be cosmetic blemishes or small little things that happen that aren't going to fundamentally impact the customer experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So super important, right? Get them to actually just use the product. Get them to like play with it as if like they're the actual customers, right? And then they go through their list. And also what we'll do is we'll attach an example of an inspection report down below so you can actually see what an inspection report looks like. They'll tell you if it's a minor mistake, minor or major or whatever. Also, again, you can do pre-inspection orders, you can do mid-inspections, you can also do post-inspections. The minimum one you should be doing is the post once everything is done.
And one other final tip I'll make is you should include your barcode, whether it's the actual UPC number or FN SKU on your packaging at this point, because they'll actually scan the barcode as well to make sure that that actually works. You don't want to send product into Amazon and they can't scan it in. So if you're going to have any labeling done when it comes to barcodes, have those placed on the product before you get to the inspection stage. All right, so let's talk about insert cards and some documents and some promotional materials that you may want to include in your packaging as part of your manufacturing run. These are things that really enable you to, again, extend the brand connection with the customers that are actually opening your packaging. But equally important, it gives you some potential promotional opportunities to get your customers information and to get a different level of engagement, which is really difficult to do on Amazon itself. This is a really key point though as we talk about this stuff. It's definitely a gray area with Amazon. Amazon does not want you capturing their customers' information and they perceive it as their customers even though they're buying your product. They don't like it when you send people off of Amazon from your inserts. And they absolutely do not like it when you ask for reviews or say if you've had a bad experience, reach out to us so we can fix it. All of those things can be really dangerous, especially reviews. In fact, don't even mention reviews in any of your inserts. Don't mention reach out to us if you're having issues. That's a surefire way and a really high risk way to potentially get your account or your product suspended from the platform. So we're gonna leave a link down to Amazon's latest terms of service. You should read those word by word. You need to get comfortable with the risk that you're willing to take in your business. If you want no risk at all, I would literally just put branding information and maybe any additional information about the product that you want and just leave it at that. Don't ask for their information. Don't send them anywhere else. If you want to enter that gray area, which is definitely not no risk, there's risk associated with it depending on how you want to assess the terms of service. You can try to gather their information. You can provide your website. You can provide your email. Just know that it's not no risk if you include those things. So a lot of the examples we're going to go over here may be too risky for you to take into account. So we want to just buyer beware, use your own judgment on this, and make sure that you're navigating the risk protocols that you feel comfortable with. The other thing I would say here is if you are going to provide a link versus providing a link to your website or sending them to a landing page, we recommend that you use QR codes. Luckily with COVID, even our parents got used to using QR codes for menus and stuff. So most people now know how to use QR codes. And what's really good about them is if you are, say, taking them to a landing page or taking them to your website or some other asset online, and you feel like the risk is too much, you can always change it if you use a QR code and direct them to your Amazon store later. This is really important because if anybody ever flags your listing because of the insert card you use, say a competitor wants to go after you, what Amazon's going to do is they're going to actually pause your inventory and they're going to actually evaluate it. They're going to go into your box, they're going to see what you have inside. If you use a QR code, you can always redirect that to your Amazon store or a safer place after the fact. So if you're ever going to provide links, we recommend you use QR codes. So here's some options and examples that you may want to consider for promotional / customer information gathering strategies when it comes to inserts. The first is just a simple discount. You know, who doesn't like a discount, right? We've seen this often when we get packages, really anytime we order anything online. So this is really simple. It's just offering a discount code percentage. You can create those discounts within Amazon so that they can actually use them on the Amazon platform. The one thing I would say here is if you use like a 10% coupon, that's what most people do, and you're really not going to get a whole lot of interest in that. So if you're going to use a discount code, we recommend doing at least 20%, but it's nice if you can get into that 25-30% range because it actually enables people to take action. You know, if I see a 10% off code, I see those everywhere. I'm probably just going to throw it out. If I see something that's 25-30%, okay, now you've got my attention. And again, you should use Amazon codes for this. This shouldn't be codes on your Shopify site. This should be something that actually gets them back onto the Amazon platform. The second example, which is a great one if you've got a product that requires any kind of thought whatsoever when it comes to either usage or installation, is to provide a installation video or a guide that they can actually reference or a page that they can reference. Not only can you grab some of your customers' information using this strategy, but what's really good is it gets in front of negative reviews. Somebody opens it up and has a question and doesn't know how to use it, and you don't provide that information for them, they're not going to take the time. They're literally just going to return it and likely leave a negative review for you. So this helps improve the customer experience, improve the reviews, and potentially gather your customers' information. The next is a VIP list. Maybe you want to have a curated list of customers that have purchased your product on Amazon, and anytime you launch a new product, anytime you do promotions, you may want to offer up those special discounts and information about upcoming products to that VIP list. So you can literally just have, hey, do you want to join our VIP list? Another little nugget, we're going to throw a screenshot up here, which is from Alibaba. You can order literally for cents really cool metal cards. So whether you're doing a VIP list or you just want to have a really cool branded card in your packaging, you can, instead of just using a paper insert, you may want to use a metal card, something that stands out. Again, it's this purple cow concept. You want it to grab their attention, you want them to take action, and using a metal card could be one of the ways to do that. The next is similar to the install instruction / video, is just a warranty extension. This is something that doesn't really cost you much. Most people, frankly, aren't ever going to even activate it. So let's say that you will offer a standard warranty of 12 months, maybe you could extend it for a year. Or you can maybe extend a 1-year warranty to a lifetime warranty. Again, a lot of people that care about product quality, that care about the stuff that they buy, they're willing to go in and insert their information to extend a warranty. This is especially important if you've got a product that's, say, over $50, certainly over $100. It's usually a higher value item. Customers want to understand that they've got safety if this thing breaks down, and the chances of it actually happening is probably on the order of 1 or 2%. So it's a great way to grab information, doesn't cost you a lot of money, and engenders a lot of trust with your customers, especially for higher ticket products. And then the final one, if you want to get really creative, is a lottery incentive. We're going to talk about how to create some of these landing pages here in a second, but basically one of the things that I've done historically is say, hey, 1 in 3 customers, if you go to this QR code, gets the chance to win one of our products. And it's almost like a wheel concept where if you've ever seen those on Shopify where you get different discounts, etc. And what we tend to do with this strategy is we'll use products that have actually been returned and that we refurbished. And if they win, we're basically sending out that inventory to customers. So it helps us use some basically unused inventory and is a really spicy thing it grabs people's attention. If I have a 1 in 3 chance of winning something, it's pretty cool. Then what we also do with that is if they don't win, we still give them a Amazon discount code as well. So if you want to get a little bit more sophisticated, that's one of the strategies you can use. So how do you actually build these pages if you want to direct them to somewhere? A really easy website that I like to use is called typeform.com. It's really easy. You don't need to be a graphic designer. You don't need to be a web designer. And it basically enables you to create these step-by-step landing pages that gather information and provide information to customers. So let's say that you're doing a warranty insert. You could have them scan the QR code. It goes to a Typeform landing page. It goes to a Typeform landing page. You could get their name. You could get their email address. You could capture all that stuff, which you can connect to a Google Sheet. So you've got a repository of all the customer information. And then you could provide them with the warranty information at the end, or install instructions or whatever it is. So if you want a simple way to create these forms, Typeform is fantastic. You can also take those Typeform pages and actually embed them into a Shopify page if you wish to get a little bit fancier down the line. So insert cards. Don't need them. It's not critical. Don't feel like you're missing out if you don't have them. There's definitely some risk, and there's a spectrum of risk depending on how you want to use them. There's some examples depending on how you guys want to implement this if you decide to in your business that we've talked about here. If you just literally want a simple branded one, totally okay. If you don't want to include one at all, it's not the end of the world. But here's some ideas as well as how to execute them if you want to take the step and build out an insert for your product. All right, so let's talk about the packaging that you're going to need once you've actually wrapped up production. And there's really two different kinds of packages. One is a package that your individual product that you're selling on Amazon, basically the SKU that you're selling on Amazon, that it needs to go in. There's also something called a master carton, which is where multiple units of these individual units will go into a larger box, and that's used for shipping, whether you're doing air or ocean freight. So we're going to talk about each one of these independently. First, let's start off with the individual package. This is typically either going to be a plastic bag or it's going to be a smaller cardboard box, depending on the size and what you're actually shipping. What you want to do here is, again, order your competitors' products. That's a pretty good indication of some of the regulatory information that you may need and how they package their goods. But you also want to have an active conversation with your factory before you go into production on what kind of packaging they recommend. Again, they make this stuff all the time. They will typically have recommendations on what works best. There's also some regulatory information that may be required for your specific product. So first of all, if it comes in a plastic bag, there needs to be some suffocation warnings and things on there. So again, engage your factory and have that conversation and make sure that those are on there. And then depending on what you're actually shipping in a cardboard box, there may be some other regulations. If it's got a battery, you may need a dangerous goods label on it. If it's got chemicals in it, you may need to have specific labels for that. A couple other things you're definitely going to want to have on these individual boxes as well is, first, you're legally required to say the country of origin or where the product's manufactured. So say you're manufacturing in China, which most of us do. You do need to have a made in China label on there. If you don't, there could be some regulatory issues at the border and potentially even at Amazon. So make sure that the manufacturer has that on there. Also, it needs to be scanned because these are individual SKUs. This is basically how Amazon is going to count your inventory. So you're going to need the Amazon FN SKU on that label, and you ideally want to have that printed at the factory. You could alternatively also use a UPC code, but typically you're going to want to have your Amazon FN SKU. So have made in China, FN SKU printed on there, and then just make sure that the box or bag type is great for your product and correlates your product, and make sure you've got the regulatory information on there for those particular packages. We're going to include an image right now as well as a link down below to what Amazon's actual guidelines are for these individual units, so you can reference those when you go to build out your own package for individual units. So the next is master cartons, which again is this larger box where you're going to put your individual SKUs into for shipping purposes. The key point here is that when you're shipping into Amazon, you can have no more than 150 units of an individual SKU in a master carton. So even if you got a really, really small item and you could fit 800 in a box, Amazon limits it to 150 per box. The other thing here is weight. So if you've got a heavier product, you can't have the box weigh more than 50 pounds. Amazon has these scanners when they come in, and it's going to know the weight and dimensions of the actual box. And if it's over the weight limit, they're going to actually charge you or potentially send the inventory back. So make sure it's 150 or less units and less than 50 pounds. The other decision you're going to need to make once you actually ship the goods, especially on ocean, is whether or not you put them on a pallet. Oftentimes what's going to happen is they will go in individual master carton boxes into a shipping container, not on a pallet. And then once they arrive at the US or destination, they'll be put onto a pallet either at your 3PL warehouse that we'll talk about and or at port. One other little tidbit too, if you're going to use pallets, especially from China, we recommend that you use plastic pallets versus wood. But the point here is that if it's going to go either in a actual box carton into an ocean container or on the pallets, you're going to want to make sure that it's secure. The stuff's going to be on the boat for 20 days plus. It's going to be in a lot of heat. It's going to potentially get banged around and moved into trucks and moved into warehouses, carried by forklifts. So just make sure it's durable to handle what it's going to take during transport and that your products don't get damaged or tipped over in the process. So use things like bubble wrap, full sheets of paper, inflatable air pillows where necessary if you've got space in your box, or things like foam sheeting. And you want to probably avoid things like styrofoam peanuts and some things like that can get really messy when you open it. It's just a really negative experience. If you've ever opened a package and you have little white foam things all over you and all over your carpet, not a great experience. So try to avoid those when it comes to protecting your goods. Now, the other thing related to master cartons, if you're shipping into Amazon directly from China, or if it's going from your warehouse or your 3PL in the US into the actual Amazon warehouse, you're going to need an Amazon shipping label. And these are put on each individual master carton if you're sending in master cartons, or if you're sending in pallets, you need them on the boxes as well as on the pallet themselves. We're going to have a separate video on how to actually do these Amazon shipping labels for master cartons and pallets in a separate video. But just note that before it leaves your Chinese manufacturer, if it's going directly into Amazon, you're going to want to make sure that they have those appropriate Amazon shipping labels on them for the boxes. All right, so let's talk about warehouses, more specifically 3PL warehouses. What 3PL stands for is a third-party logistics provider. Think of this like your intermediary or your staging warehouse as you take inventory from China and you send it either to end customers if you're selling on Shopify, or in most of our cases, actually to the Amazon FBA warehouses to be shipped by them. Now, in a perfect world, you take everything from China and you'd send it directly into Amazon's warehouses and you never touch it. And in some quantities, that's absolutely possible. But Amazon does have inventory limits. They've got a whack load of other sellers and millions of products with a finite amount of warehouse space. So what they do is they set caps on each individual seller account and product for how much can be shipped into their warehouses. And you may actually have more inventory than you're capable of sending into Amazon at any given time. So what you need to do is you need to stage it somewhere, and we're going to use 3PLs to do this. So why are these warehouses important? Number one, like I just talked about, it's great for stock overflow. So if you've got to kind of reserve some inventory that's not ready to go into Amazon, or there's not enough room in Amazon, you can stage it there. It's good if you want to have bulk shipments. Maybe you bring on retailers over time and you actually need to send bulk shipments to other wholesales that aren't only Amazon. Gives you another set of inventory that goes to non-Amazon bulk customers. And then you may want to have actual individual shipments to customers, whether it's a Shopify customer that orders from your website, or you could also set up FBM fulfillment or fulfilled by merchant on Amazon, where you're actually selling to Amazon customers, but you're not storing it in their warehouses. So there could be a multitude of cases where you need one of these 3PL warehouses. So when do you use them? Number one, if you run out of room in Amazon, you got to store it somewhere. That's going to be the most primary use case for most people. If you want to actually have an FBM listing, again, where you're shipping from your own warehouse instead of from Amazon's warehouse, that's another possibility. And this can tend to be necessary if, say, you're waiting for stock to go into Amazon, it hasn't been checked in yet, but you still want to generate sales. You can activate an FBM listing and continue to get sales from Amazon customers, even if you don't have stock in their warehouses. And when you use FBM, it basically prevents stockouts on Amazon. You can continue to get sales, and it helps preserve the organic rank that you've worked hard to get on Amazon. And then finally, again, if you need it shipped elsewhere, if it's a Shopify customer or a wholesale order, it enables you to ship to those customers as well. So just something to be aware of, there are fees associated with this. So typically there's going to be fees to actually store your product at a 3PL, and that's going to be based on the dimensions or the number of pallets that you're actually storing. There's going to be fees for them to offload it from a truck and check it into their warehouse. There's going to be fees to put it back onto a truck. And if you're sending individual units or boxes, they're going to charge you to basically pick that box off of the warehouse, and they're going to charge you to actually label it and ship it. So there's some fees that you need to be aware of. But the good thing here is we've got a list of our recommended 3PL providers down below. We've checked a lot of them. We know a lot of the different prices. We know the best geographies. These are ones that are vetted by FBA Masterclass that we use ourselves. So if you're in need of a 3PL, check those down below. And if you have any questions, let us know.